We're going to start in just a minute, Thomas. I think I jumped the gun a little bit and started 6 minutes early. But, I've been showing up late to everything in my life. So I figured
it's your space. You can start it whenever you want.
I think we should just go for it, even though I'm in the car right now.
Yeah.
And, just enjoying this life of mine. My fat little fingers clicking on buttons I shouldn't be clicking on.
Yes.
But yeah, how's everybody doing? Doing all right, Thomas?
Yeah, doing good. It was a nice weather today, and went home at lunch. Took the dog out, played a little, let him run around a little bit, and just had an overall good day.
How lovely! It was rather beautiful in the nation. In the nation's capital today, and I availed myself of it by driving around with my convertible top down, and had a lovely pasta dinner. Did not vote.
Good.
Did not vote. Did not vote. Should have voted. Had a lovely conversation with my sister about our fucked up childhoods, but it was it's good time. Good time, all things considered.
It's always good when you can have honest talks like that about certain things that happen as a kid with your siblings, and it's good. So good for you.
Long before I had the fuck you money. And I highly recommend that just as a pathway in life. That if you're just like, fuck it, YOLO, you'll be surprised at how many things, like, that is true that, like, fortune favors the bold or the foolhardy. And honestly, like, I've spent a lot of life just dealing with that shit. I'm not allowed to talk about are telling me to shut the fuck up. So if anybody asks about Clearview, I have to say I have to shut the fuck up, even though I want to answer your question. So just know that it's not personal. It's because a number of people are upset with me winning my court case thus far. So I have to shut the fuck up. So I'm not going to talk about Clearview or the fact that I'm running train on all the bad people who are trying to steal the company from me. And I'm not talking about it. As you know, I'm just not talking about it.
Yes.
That's how we're going to do it. So,
yes.
I didn't talk about it. You didn't bring it up. Okay,
cool.
Yeah.
So I know that there's
again,
not even a book or anything about it.
Anyway, shall we get into it? I mean, do we want to talk about just how pathetic the evening was for the Republican Party?
Yeah, I just want to give
should I talk about my experiences meeting Mr. Daniel Cameron, who, of course, is not at all a token. Not at all. No, sir, he is not a token in the Republican Party.
Hey, Charles.
He's an upstanding gentleman, African American from Kentucky, and not at all super important for Mitch McConnell's legacy, who fears being branded as a racist throughout history. No, not that Daniel Cameron. So yeah, we can get into that in a second. Looks like Glenn Youngkin's not running for president too. So chalk up a defeat there for for everybody in Virginia that predicted Glenn Youngkin, private equity billionaire that he is, or centimillionaire, or whatever the fuck. Kind of not going to happen for him either, I'm afraid.
Well, he can do more for
so
Israel.
Pretty interesting night.
The governor.
Pro-choice side wins in Ohio. That kind of wasn't all that expected. It turns out abortion rights are actually kind of popular. But yeah, I think this all portends very well for our man Joe Biden. I think it portends quite well indeed. So I don't know. Any thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to Hunkle. I see Hunkle down there.
Tom, did I lose you?
Can you hear me?
Is Tom speaking and I can't hear him? Is that what's going on? Fucking A, Musk.
Hey.
Fucking A, Musk.
I think I got it.
Tom, drop down and come back up.
I think I got it.
I can't hear you. Unless I want to make you co-host or something. I'll make you co-host too. You can be a co-host. Come back up. Fucking Musk. Can't even do anything right. But yeah. It's just me and my lonesome right now. Anyone else want to come up? No? We're just waiting for Thomas to return. But yeah, so I think just in general today was a pretty terrible day for the Republican Party. And I think it kind of portends very very, very well for Joe Biden in 2024. I mean, what are we? We are about a year out from the 2024 election, and it looks like Grandpa Ice Cream is, he doesn't have to be the best, he doesn't have to be the smoothest, he doesn't have to be the toughest, but he just has to not suck as much as the Republicans do. And that's all he has to do to win. Don't you love electoral politics? I know I do. So yeah, what do you think, Tom?
Well, I think that I'm glad that I see Hunkle down in the space, and he posted a picture of a pretty gnarly auto accident he was in. So glad to see him in here and hope he's doing good.
It's that energy right there, protecting him from all things dangerous. Live fast, live dangerously, young man, but do preserve yourself. It's important that you live to see the presidency of Hunter Biden. Because
Yeah,
these are important things.
I think it's funny that the Republicans are losing elections, and their big call to arms is to pass a censure of Rashida Tlaib. And I mean, these people are just pathetic. And, in my opinion, the Republican Party does not have a right to exist. They're just disgusting. So that's kind of my thought on
I mean,
electoral politics.
the fact that even Tucker Carlson is noticing like how weird it is that the first thing that Mike Johnson does is talk about Israel. That's kind of a tell, that like you've kind of fucked up if you're in that position, you know. So I don't know.
Oh,
Any thoughts, Richard?
That whole thing was completely stupid. The other thing, it's this like she's connecting Rashida Tlaib with this anti-war Jewish group that went and sat in the it wasn't even the Capitol. I think it was another building. And they're obviously not engaging an insurrection. She's like, that was an insurrection. And it's just such a weird argument to make because it's like because she's so dumb, she can't like think like two steps. Okay, if we agree with your assertion that that was an insurrection, then J6 was like an insurrection on steroids. Like it was I mean, it's just such an unbelievably stupid argument. And
Well, Napoleon used to make that. There was that famous line from him, which is "Never interrupt your opponent when they're making a
yeah,
mistake," where it's like said to be. And I've got to tell you, like, watching all the Republicans lose their shit over Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, it's pretty telling that they're basically just owned by the Israelis.
yeah,
It's sort of like it speaks for
it
itself,
does.
and it does it in a way that like people like me who've been saying it for a very long time, like we can't even really say it, but like you see them just like trash this like Palestinian woman. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with Rashida Tlaib on most things. Like, frankly, I find her kind of annoying, just like aesthetically. She's not a hottie like my girl Ilhan,
Uh-huh.
or kind of a very fetching figure in the form of AOC. So I'm not like one of her fanboys, but it is interesting that like the response of a lot of these people during the Gaza situation is like, I know what we'll do. We'll get rid of the only Palestinian in Congress.
Yeah,
That'll solve it.
it's pretty sick, actually.
I mean, it's pretty revealing, though. No.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is revealing, but I mean, it's like the Ryan Zinke thing of like, this is the moment in which you ban all Palestinians. This is you're going to single out this one group that's a tiny percentage of the population. I mean, it's just absurd. And then, again, they go after the one Palestinian House member, and they're just like, "Oh no, we're censoring you. We're doing." I mean, it's just grotesque.
Well, every time there's one of these geopolitical things, I go well out of my way to eat the food of the country that I want to win. So I'm having some really good. I had the pasta dinner earlier, which was kind of a late lunch, and now I'm having some rather delicious Palestinian kebabs and a sort of falafel wrap. And so I'm pretty happy in general that this conflict is taking place in an area whose food I like to eat. So, these things all revolve around me, as you know, or you, as the case may be. And so I think it's important that we just sort of, embrace the chaos here and we just eat good Palestinian food for the next few months until this thing resolves itself.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any of that up in Montana. By the way, what happened in Montana today? I mean, I saw
Oh
um,
God.
I saw John Forte, who's not at all a mobster, of course, connected to the tech world. I saw Governor John Forte effectively made it the next state, or the next. It's an outpost of Israel right now.
Yeah, the flag, the picture I saw, the flag was at the same height as the American flag.
Well, at
And
least it wasn't higher.
right, I mean, that in a way, I question his true loyalty to Israel.
I
Yeah.
think
I mean, I
it's
think
somewhat
are
anti-Semitic that
we
he had it at the
positive
same
that
height.
he's not an anti-Semite? Yeah. I mean, the guy's also a young Earth creationist and evolution denier. So, I mean, there it is. It's just, I just hate these people so much. I cannot put it into words.
Well, when are we going to have the pleasure of supporting Richard Spencer for governor of Montana? Are we ready?
I don't know if the world's ready, but I mean, yeah, fun times. But I don't know. This has depressed me. This past month has been extremely depressing because earlier with Biden doing well, defensible. War is certainly tough in Ukraine. It's stagnant. It seems to be a frozen operation, but there was still a thought that this was going to reach a positive revolution, or excuse me, positive resolution. And now we're here. We're back in the W era, although it's actually much worse than the W era. It's much worse. It's stupider. It's more black and white, Manichaean things. I mean, it makes the W era seem nuanced, actually. And it's just terrible what is happening.
I must tell you, I'm enjoying it. This is probably the difference between us and personality types. It's nice to see all these assets just out themselves all around us. It's nice to see the Silicon Valley people basically let the mask slip about how they all effectively work for Israel. It's nice to see it. I enjoy it personally. So I'm for it for the moment. I think it's a pretty exciting time, to put it mildly. And I don't think that, like, there's a lot of people that don't yet know that it's time to bend the knee to Uncle Sam and Uncle Joe. They think they can wait this out. They think that they're, going to make it or whatever. And, you just watch Trump get dressed down by a judge on this, civil fraud case. And just time and time again, these people get the shit kicked out of them for committing criminal acts. And I, for one, am totally here for it. I think we're witnessing a kind of revolution going on in our country for the better. And I hope they all wear, Brian Mass Israeli uniforms. I hope they all out themselves. It's actually quite revealing and useful to see.
Well, I mean, they're outing themselves. I'll give you that. Yeah.
Richard, I just wanted to say thank you for the thoughts you shared last night, and hope it's okay that I appropriated about 12 seconds of your of a clip that I put onto Charlie Kirk's picture of him at the Wailing Wall, and I was like, I think he'll be cool with that. I was like, I don't.
Yeah. No, I'm totally cool with it. I mean, if I say it, whether I should have said it or not, that can be debated. But, if Dark Spencer mode is enacted and I have high adrenaline that night, then yeah, it's out there. It's out in the world.
It's only about 12 seconds of it.
He had a good communion with his guinea pigs and they told them that it was time to go hard.
It was great.
Yes. The guinea pigs told me that
I'm
yeah, they were
totally
just
here
like,
for it. I thoroughly
"You're going
enjoyed it.
hard on Israel tonight, cuck." And I was like, "Okay."
I didn't want to, but if the guinea pigs told me.
They're very persuasive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys can hear them.
I can. Well, of course we can hear them.
Yeah,
Of
they're
course.
doing this alarm sounding. I don't know what it means exactly. I just gave them some lettuce to chomp on.
I
but
had
they seem to
a lovely guinea pig named Fuzzy Piglet, and he went to his maker when he chewed through an electrical cord,
Oh
and that
my
was
gosh!
Fuzzy. So
You
keep
just
him. It is what it is. I mean, I wasn't there to witness it, but apparently my dad said that the whole house smelled of cooked guinea pig.
oh my god, that's
So just be
really
careful of
sad.
them around electrical outlets or electrical plugs and whatnot. Yeah,
Or
I mean,
he'll
look,
turn into like this supercharged guinea pig. He'll like, he'll be like extremely muscular, and he'll like have very high brain power, and he's a
yeah, I think this is
danger
how
to
Pinky and the Brain
humanity.
happened, right? Like one of them
Right.
chewed through an electrical socket or something. I think it's quite right, but um, I think for our purposes, we should maybe let's go into
Okay,
the.
hold on, stop, Charles. Did Susanna Gibson win?
I don't know.
I
You're
can't.
asking the right questions, though.
Okay, well, I think I'm not following this that avidly, but it is a funny story. But so apparently, it's also very significant, like her district. But I saw something where she was up 52-48, and there were like majority. I don't know. Crazy.
If she had been in my district, I checked. I didn't vote today in Virginia, but I checked to see if I was in her district, and I was
Yeah.
almost certainly going to vote for her.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, right now, it's apparently a nail biter, so to speak, and it's neck and neck, so to
Yeah.
speak, and
Toe curling. Yeah. We
she
don't
is
know how it's gonna come out. Yeah.
she is down by 40 votes, but there's
Yeah.
still some stuff to come in there, so to
So
speak.
she's gone down by 40 at this point,
She's down
but
by 40, but she could come
we
back
don't.
up again. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, when is the
I
climax
for
going
one
to
have
occur?
nothing against women doing this sort of thing. I mean, you and I somewhat disagreed on this, but my view is that if you're keeping a marriage alive, you're keeping a marriage alive. And I mean, you and I are divorced men. Like I'm not here to
Yeah.
judge people who are in marriages that are a little unorthodox. I personally probably wouldn't fuck my wife for money, but I don't know. I haven't been married that long. If I were, like we'll see. Maybe I should have done that. Maybe I'd still be married today. Something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't judge personal indiscretions, and of course, a good mistress has saved many a marriage. But
Frankly,
um,
I judge her more favorably because of it. Frankly, I don't really
well,
like nurses. She's a
yeah.
nurse by
But
trade, and the
okay,
fact that
this
she's
is
like has this whole extracurricular life is actually kind of makes her interesting.
I mean, she's charging money on ChatterBait. I mean, I think that's where she lost me. Actually, it's kind of like, all right,
So she should just give it away for free, or what?
No,
What?
she can.
well,
Worst case scenario, be a Claremont Fellowship, like
Yeah, I mean,
Jack
did
Murphy.
Jack Murphy do that? I mean, I don't know.
yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Jack Murphy did stuff like this. I mean, it's just, I'm not even sure she got that much money. I think it was just some weird fantasy of being a like cam girl grifter. I mean, it's just
Is it better or worse if she got more
odd.
money? If she got more money, is it bad or is it good? Do we look
I don't
favorably upon this?
even know. I mean, I think it's actually better. Like doing something like that and then earning $100 or something. That is actually very bad. I'm just saying that if there were a sex scandal, she's hot, and so unlike the vast majority of sex scandals in Washington, it's actually something that I like want to learn about. As opposed to like the rumors of MTG and Kevin McCarthy, and it's like barf bag, please. But with her, obviously things are different. But it's the going on ChatterBait and being a cam girl. I'm just kind of like, what are you doing? Like what? Why?
That is pretty bad. I mean, it's like, to me, in the ranking of like doing that type of work, you'd have to put that well underneath like OnlyFans.
Oh,
Yeah,
I've got to be honest with you.
It's like the farm leagues.
I look
it's definitely like
favorably
that.
about voting for Mia Khalifa for president of the United States. I don't know if she's a natural born citizen, but I think it's a matter of time before we have a porn star as president. And I, for
Probably
one, just
true.
want to get out ahead of the curve. And frankly,
Yeah.
if we're honest about it, I think a lot of the porn stars would actually be like a lot more reasonable on a lot more issues than a lot of our mainstream politicians.
Well, I
You
mean,
know,
the Khalif woman
like
was
would you rather vote for a
inaugurate the
porn
porn
star
dress.
or like Tom Cotton? Right? I mean, give me a fucking break.
But you repeat
Right?
yourself. No, just yeah. No, I would no. I would. Well, correct. But you're Tom Cotton. Yeesh.
I don't know. I don't know. I kind of feel about this that like
They
it's
throw
probably
gays off of roofs in Iran. That was
yeah.
really concerned to him back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Of course, his real sociopathy is that he likes to buy birthday cakes when it's not his birthday. When I read that in that Washington Post story, I was like, "Fucking disgusting human being."
What?
I mean, who buys a birthday cake and just eats it by themselves? Somebody really sick, I assume.
So it has like happy birthday
Yeah,
written on the
yeah,
cake.
yeah. That's
That
apparently.
is
I'm not
odd.
making this
That is
up.
odd as hell.
Somebody can Google this and put it up in the jumbotron. But Tom Cotton birthday cake, you'll find it. Like I'm not kidding about that. It's a real thing.
That is definitely odd as hell. I mean, it's one thing to buy a cake and eat it alone. Like maybe that, you're in a bad place right now and you need a little surprise. But to have something that says happy birthday, Tom, that's just bizarre. Like, what?
Well, Charles, did you see the Ron Paul 88th birthday cake?
No, I didn't. Somebody needs to share that.
Well, somebody.
Did it have a swastika on
Well,
it?
that's funny you say that, Richard, because there were supposed to. It looked like there were supposed to be 14
Yeah,
candles,
hold
but
up.
there was one
Tom
missing.
Cotton eats birthday cake almost every day. April 3rd, 2015. Oh shit. This is from NPR. Every day is a birthday for Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton has a reputation for being a very serious man. The military veteran, Harvard Law School graduate, and freshman U.S. senator gained wide attention for being able to rally 46 blah 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 to write a letter objecting to Iran blah blah blah. So this side most would not expect. In an interview with the New York Times, Mark Leibovich, who's like one of those weirdos who writes books about the whatever. Fine. You have described as having very little appetite for frivolity. Do you have any guilty pleasures? This is Leibovich asking Cotton. Because I run every morning. Leibovich followed up, pointing out that sounds neither guilty nor pleasurable. And then Cotton does, he says, but I do it so I can indulge in the guilty pleasure of eating birthday cake. Every day? Most days, with ice cream. Early on, when my wife and I were dating, we went to the grocery
Yeah.
store, and I told her that sometimes I just buy birthday cakes and I eat them. And she said, "Really? I do too. Even
Oh
if it's
my
not somebody's
God.
birthday?" Yes. She went to the grocery store yesterday and picked up a white birthday cake.
Are you not relating to this, Charles? Is this
I don't know what to say about it. It's like one of those things where you like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's like a code for something, like how he's a swinger or something. I don't know. What does birthday
Yeah,
cake
I was
really mean?
thinking, he was like tempted to reveal. He was like, "Is there just some odd tidbit about you, Tom, that we could relay to the people?" And his mind is going like, "I'm gay, I'm gay, I'm gay." And then he was like, "Oh, I eat birthday cakes." Like it was some weird lie to cover up the bigger lie that he lives every day. That's my analysis.
When I first met him, he had a roommate that was his boyfriend back when I was
Yeah,
at Claremont, and I've always found that just kind of weird. I don't know, but
yeah.
I don't really want to be a politician all that much, So there's that.
Was his boyfriend a defense contractor?
No, that was Lindsey Graham. His
Oh, that's
boyfriend, I
right.
think, was like some grad student or some shit.
I'm just helping him make it through a tough time in his life.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It was also interesting. I interviewed a lot of people who served in his unit in back when he was like, I think he was some kind of, he wasn't a ranger. He lied about that, but he was in the military. And I interviewed a bunch of people, and they just fucking hated him. You know, so it is what it is.
He was writing like weird letters or something back when he was over in Iraq. I
Mm-hmm.
think to like the. I'll have to Google that, but there was something weird about the letters he was writing, and he was like really pro, like killing everybody in the Middle East. Like
Yeah,
it was.
he wrote it to the Powerline blog guy.
Oh yeah, no weirdness there.
Well, he's the one that's he's the one.
Isn't that like Jihad Watch adjacent type stuff?
Yeah, well,
Like
he was the
Frank
one who was
Gaffney
pictured.
types?
Well, he was pictured with what's his face with he was pictured with Netanyahu in that born in Israel or conceived in Israel, born in America thing,
Uh,
if you recall that.
yeah, the Breitbart.
Yeah, he's the one who's seated. Scott Johnson is the one who's seated at Powerline, and then his daughter Eliana works for Paul Singer's Free Beacon, which is that the one that Alana Johnson works for, which is that Israeli disinformation publication.
Yeah, it's a rag.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So let's go into the I was gonna say Kenya. Whoops. Kentucky election. You got Daniel Cameron, who's somebody that I met a few years ago. I believe he was Attorney General. Like I met him through the Republican Attorney Generals Association, and he was very, very close with Leonard Leo. So for those who are saying, who are at home, Leonard Leo he's the kind of head of the Federalist Society. He's the kind of mobster that's allowing all this foreign money to come in and corrupt our court system. And there was a good frontline documentary about Mitch McConnell. And Mitch McConnell, of course, is the one who worked with Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society to pick all of these judges. And McConnell had hoped that he could get Daniel Cameron in as governor, and that if he needed to step down for his considerable health issues, that he could have Daniel Cameron appoint his successor. Right, that was the kind of dream, to have his protege appoint his successor. But now it looks like if McConnell steps down, between now and 2026, when he has to run for re-election, that his successor will almost certainly be a Democrat, which is just a very fitting touch on the end of McConnell's time in Congress or time in the Senate. I think the Frontline documentary, for those who haven't seen it, and maybe Tom, you could find it and put it up in the Jumbotron, it's well worth going into because it talks about kind of like the weird sociopathy of McConnell and just how he's like working his way up the greasy pole of politics and
Are
all
you
the kind of.
are you talking about his one with the Supreme Court?
Yeah, there's one that just came out. It's not the one about the court. It's about him
Got it.
personally.
Okay, yeah.
It came out. I watched it this morning when I was like doing my various errands around the house, and I highly recommend people watch it. I think it's like about an hour and a half, but it really gets you to just like how immoral and antisocial he is. But yeah, there is Daniel Cameron's wife, although she's apparently like a lot plumper now, is my understanding. So maybe we could get a more realistic photo of her. These things happen, I guess. I think she's had maybe kids or something, so I don't want to be too cruel.
Yeah, I think that they that was maybe like before they had kids or whatever, but it seemed recent.
Yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, so basically, the long and short of it, like the real McConnell story, is something that I wrote about uh, basically about a year ago now. I talked about McConnell's ties to Elaine Chao and Elaine Chao's family ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And it was basically about what the hell's the name of that post? I'll pull it up and share it with everybody. But it's basically about how he, got rid of his first wife, and it's called "How China Took Over the GOP," and I did a part one, part two, and part three. It's from February 2022, and it's kind of it goes into kind of the history and the relationship between Taiwan, China, Chiang Kai-shek, all of that stuff. And anyway, so it kind of goes into these relationships that exist, and it kind of explains why Elaine Chao, for instance, was such a Musk fanboy, because obviously Musk is himself tied into China, and it's why she didn't really want to regulate Musk's Tesla. Right? Tesla was like up to no good, and so that kind of gives you kind of the background on this as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a kind of fascinating history here. I mean, I think the way to understand it, in essence, is that McConnell is a kind of Chinese proxy in our politics. And of course, in McConnell's district, there was all this money laundering that took place with Kolomoisky and with various other Russian players that would operate in Kentucky. So McConnell is very much knee deep in all of that kind of thing. Um, and yeah, he's been there for quite a long time. He's probably most famously known for the judges, who are, of course, trying to control the federal judiciary. That kind of gives you a sense of what's going on there.
Did I post the right YouTube documentary?
I
I think
think
I
you
did.
did. Yeah, I think you did.
Now he's got kids from his first marriage, correct? And if I understand correctly, they protest him and hate him. Like they're pretty far on the left, if you will.
Yeah, it doesn't go into
Which
that in this documentary,
of course not.
but it is interesting. So he kind of sees himself as a civil rights supporting Republican.
Well, they went woke.
He votes for LBJ in '64, and he kind of comes up as a kind of like liberal Republican. And then when Reagan kind of comes in, he moves much harder to the right, and he effectively forms this political alliance slash marriage with Elaine Chao. And we talked before about her and all of her family ties with the Chinese state. And I think, yeah, there was a New York Times story that Raj did, which is basically her family's from this like large shipping company. And I actually, when I was last at Harvard Business School, I gave a lecture in like the Chow Center at Harvard Business School, which was given to Harvard um, by that kind of background there. So it was given to them by the Chow family. And so, yeah, there's a long history here of like shipping. There's always this question too of like, what's on the ships that you're shipping, right? If they're coming from China, could they be fentanyl? I mean, there's like a lot of questions there that we should be asking about this relationship. And of course, Chow goes after she resigns after January 6th. She resigns like very abruptly, and then she goes to work. She can't really get any corporate boards except for Kroger's, which is the mobbed up grocery store chain. So yeah, it's very interesting kind of details about the McConnell Chow alliance, and it looks like it's breaking down. I mean, we had McConnell have two senior moments recently, and it looks like it's kind of falling apart. And of course, Daniel Cameron was a political ally, as I mentioned before, of Leonard Leo, and he was sort of like the great black hope for the GOP. And of course, it's not going to happen today. And I think that that's very interesting to kind of see. Bashir clearly is a kind of blue dog Democrat, much more sensible than some of the other Democrats. And he, I believe his father was a governor as well. So there's a kind of return to kind of more centrist, more sane, governance in Kentucky. Now, the one that's kind of most interesting to me tonight is what's going on in Virginia. We were told that basically when the private equity, centimillionaire ran, um, that we would get all these interesting candidates, that he'd have mass appeal. But it looks like we have another example, right, of basically private equity not being able to take over the party, right? We had or not being able to really like have a commanding lead. We saw this with Mitt Romney, of course. Mitt Romney, of course, being a private equity guy, he's retiring from the Senate, right? And of course, we see that many of the candidates that were recruited by uh, that were recruited by um, by Jeff Rowe and by a number of other kind of figures, that we see that basically they all kind of lost in Virginia. So that's kind of, I think, it for the political career of Glenn Youngkin. Ohio, it looks like it's just another example of like women turning out to vote to just ensure that they have abortion rights.
So, do we know that the Republicans have lost Virginia? Is that clear?
Yeah, they're not going to get their trifecta, which is what they were hoping for.
Okay.
So they're blocked again.
So what they're not, they have the House and not the Senate or something? What is it?
Yeah, I forget exactly, but they don't have total control of the government. They sort of lost it entirely. I'll pull it up exactly what the actual makeup is, but the whole point is that they basically just don't have control. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to pull it up exactly so that we have it. Yeah, it looks like Gibson is still like hanging in there, so to speak. And it looks like, I think she may win if you look at the outsized votes. Yeah, she just took the lead, by the way.
Wow.
Susanna Gibson just took the lead in Western Henrico.
Well, she really came from behind.
You know,
Many such cases.
many
Yes.
such cases. By the way, I think she's the future governor of the state because she has name ID. I mean, she's pretty impressive.
True.
You know, I mean, I don't know. There's a certain sense here. You know, one of the accounts that I follow is the Redistrict account. You know, it looks like, I don't know if we have the numbers yet out of Mississippi, but it looks like it's looking like Reeves may win re-election. So there's likely to be a runoff. Let's see here. Yeah, so Democrats retain control of the Virginia Senate. And yeah, that the House is, I think, what Glenn Youngkin's party controls. And then let's see here. Yeah, so they're guaranteed to keep the majority. So looking pretty bad. You know, the Democrats, of course, pick up another. They're up another Senate, another House seat. So their majority, basically, if you look at who's going to be, you know, who's resigning, who's down, and all of that, it looks like there's just a 3-seat majority.
This is unintentionally good for Trump because I do think that Youngkin, just because he's like a central casting rich guy Republican, but one who is a skilled politician and, you know, fairly likable, etc. And he had this big victory back in 2021. He was waiting in the wings. I mean, if he had gotten the trifecta, as you say, or if he had gotten a big lead and there was a story about it, there would be a lot more discussion about him entering the race.
I guess it'll be very interesting to see how people respond to Gibson if she wins, right? Because she's kind of like represents a kind of moderate district. It's not really all that impressive. I don't know. It's kind of fascinating in its own right. I think we should maybe move on to the more tech-related news. If people are, you know, want to talk about that. I know we were talking about the King's speech. I don't know if you had an occasion to.
Well,
I highly recommend people watch the King's speech. It's well worth watching because it sort of lays out the agenda for the government and the sort of election that's coming forward. And basically, Sunak is running on a tough on crime, you know, drill baby drill agenda in the UK. And of course, he's trying to shake down the various tech companies who are coming there to give him money and to give his party money. So that's kind of interesting. You know, for our purposes, what's fascinating here as well is that, you know, we saw Mark Zuckerberg, you know, basically look even more ghoulish. There's this post that's up that I put up in the Jumbotron about the unsealed version of the Massachusetts complaint against Instagram. And Nick Clegg, who's the former Liberal Dem leader, and he's the sort of president of global affairs. So he sort of left government, probably MI6, came over and took over, and yeah. So Nick Clegg recommended it. Basically, it's about all of this evidence that you know Facebook and Instagram in particular are bad for young women, that they're leading to all these problems. And Vice President of Global Affairs Nick Clegg promptly forwarded the ask to CEO Mark Zuckerberg, recommending additional investment to strengthen our position on well-being within the company. Um, in Clegg's email to Zuckerberg, he emphasized that well-being work is, quote, increasingly urgent to address the concerns about the impact of our products on young people's mental health. Clegg further stressed to Zuckerberg that we need to do more, and we are being held back by a lack of investment on the product side, which means that we're not able to make changes and innovations at the pace required, noting that our well-being work is both understaffed and fragmented. We are not on track to succeed for our core well-being topics, problematic use, harassment, all that kind of thing. And then Zuckerberg ignored Clegg's request for months. All the while, Meta's leadership continued to espouse the need to invest in well-being. So, I mean, I think that kind of speaks for itself. There's going to be a lot more stuff that comes out soon. I'm helping a journalist with a lot of Ben Shapiro research that I have about Ben Shapiro's relationship with Mark Zuckerberg and Jared Kushner, and how they kind of rigged a lot of Facebook to kind of push the goy slop of the Daily Wire. So I think what we're going to see over time is we're going to see a sort of concerted history, a concerted pattern of ghoulish behavior on the part of Mark Zuckerberg. And I think that that's going to kind of play out as time goes on. So I think that that's sort of an issue to watch. It's almost like Musk and he are racing each other for worst billionaire in the world. I think
Facebook just needs to delete itself, or there needs to be serious action of preventing people from joining Facebook until they're, I don't know, at least 16 or 18.
I'd go for 25 or 30.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like it should just be banned. We should just be honest about it. There's all these Silicon Valley people, many of them Jews. Not that that's a bad thing, but it just is what it is. Which is that they want to control, people's relationships with social media. So they're pro banning TikTok, and I honestly think we should take them up on that, and we should just ban TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Just do a clean sweep. I think it would be much healthier, and the government moved rather quickly to go after vaping, and I think it's arguably the case that these things are much more destructive than vaping ever was.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, not even a question.
Oh, by the way, Delian finally blocked me. For those who are keeping tabs, I wrote a number of things about Delian, who's over at Founders Fund, and apparently I'm told that there's an order that went out at the various tech VCs that I am to be banned by them on social media. So if you see people tweeting things that are interesting, that are VCs or whatever, please DM them to me, as it's unlikely that I can see them, given that I'm blocked by the lion's share of them. So make of that what you will, friends. I think that that's going to be one of the stories over the next 6 months to a year, is the number of VC funds that blow up in a high interest rate environment. I don't know. Go ahead, Ace.
WeWork.
Oh, we should talk about WeWork too.
It finally fully went under.
Yeah, I wrote a piece a while back about Adam Newman's relationship with the Israeli intelligence services, particularly the Israeli Navy. And I think people would be wise to check that out on my Substack. If they just, it's Adam Newman, Neumann, talking about all of his weird connections. And of course, A16Z gave him a bunch of money. So I think that that's kind of useful to pay attention to. Go ahead, Ace.
Yes, I had a very serious question for Richard, which is, on a level of intensity, when you were referring to Dark Spencer, would that be comparable or surpassing the Amy Teal project? Could you kind of, what is the level of intensity between those two dynamics?
Well, Mine's authentic and genuine. The Amy has, I think, probably did start out as authentic and genuine, but is now, I don't know. I think she's clearly been given orders in certain ways. And she's, pro Israel, but not too much, not over the top. Um, she was pro Russia as well. I mean, so her position, if you're pretending to be an isolationist or whatever, it doesn't even quite make sense. So yeah, she has been activated. They just do this. Like there's someone like I mean I know I sound paranoid, but it's like there is someone that is pushing these people in certain directions. I mean, I guess you could, to be fair, explain it through groupthink, but I don't think it is groupthink.
It's like who hits the button to bring out Tommy Robinson and I forgot the other gal's name. You were talking about it
Oh,
earlier today.
yeah, exactly. Do you think that that was just coincidental
Oh
that
boy,
Katie
what some
Hopkins,
weird timing.
yeah, just
Oh,
before this big Palestinian rally in London as well, like a week before, so they would have enough time to get the memes out, and they just jump back in it. Like I get all this stuff on my For You feed of Tommy Robinson, like, oh yeah, we in Britain, we are, we hate the Palestinians, and Israel. It's based, it's
here comes
based.
here comes my 2015 goy slop into your feed. No thanks.
It's
Whenever I see a
Western
Tommy
Civ.
Robinson figure, I understand why my ancestors got on that boat and came to America, 400 years ago or so. Like it makes total sense to me. It's one of those situations where you're like, gotcha. Like, I understand. I mean, look, he did try to enter the country illegally, so there's that. I met him when I was in London visiting Assange with Congressman Rohrabacher back in the day, and he was quite the gentleman for what it's worth, to me anyway. I think he sort of realized that he was, outclassed by me. But Robert Shillman is the Cognex billionaire who previously funded Ben Shapiro a bunch and funds Ezra Levant, and he was a lot of the money behind Tommy Robinson. Make of that what you will. So yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I'm going to bring it back to the previous conversation you guys were having when I requested to speak. You guys were talking about Joe Biden specifically. And I was reading an article today by him, and I like to bounce my ideas from what I read from him off your head because you guys are kind of like different. But he was stating that it seems odd to him that, and I think it made sense to me, and I couldn't really square it away in my mind. Maybe you could help me. How like liberals or Democrats in general would support Ukraine, but then Biden would still support Israel, when in reality, there's more in common with Ukrainians and Palestinians on principle, taking out the Jew factor. But like, I guess what I'm asking is like, do you think like, because I think he's kind of right when he says that the only thing in common they have is these opposite, I guess kinds of Jews on both sides of our political parties. But do you think the Israel and Bibi thing, like how does Blinken fall into it? Like, do you think Blinken's like a big Netanyahu guy or what? Like, what's
No,
the
no, no. Blinken is in the tradition of Kissinger, which is that he likes Israel in theory but hates the Israelis in practice. That's kind of where he comes out of. That's his tradition.
How do you,
I have a copy.
Charles? Can I ask you this? How do you think
Yeah.
he squares that with his grandfather's legacy of what he did?
You mean his step grandfather, or you mean which grandfather?
I'll get back to you on that one. I don't know. I just found it was the one that raised a lot of money for the Zionist settlers and Israel bonds and stuff like that, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I've come to understand Blinken is as a very precocious Harvard student. He marries a shiksa. He doesn't keep kosher. But he's very, very loyal to Joe Biden, and they go way back together. And way back in the day, when he was a college student, he actually interviewed Kissinger, and he wrote his Harvard thesis, which I have a copy of somewhere around my home, talking about Soviet policy vis-a-vis oil. and oil extraction and how to kind of deal with the Soviet Union on oil policy, which is a kind of oddly relevant topic for our current day, given that it was written in the 1980s. I think there was a Politico story about him, and I wrote something about Blinken and the oil piece maybe like a year or two ago at my Substack. What can I say about Blinken? I mean, Blinken is one of these kind of Jews that is kind of a Jewish American or American Jew, where he's kind of sympathetic to the Israelis, kind of through cultural affinity, but he tends to be much more skeptical of a lot of their policies and how they're pursuing them. And certainly, he's not a Netanyahu fan by any means. I think what's happening is that there's quite a number. There's a kind of delusion operating in democratic politics and in large D democratic politics, which is that we can go back to some earlier world in which the Israelis are like the oppressed people and they're a satellite of American interests. I don't think that world was ever really true, and so I think that we're basically allowing a polite fiction to exist, and I think that fiction needs to die. That's kind of my view of it.
So, like, am I viewing this wrong? Because, like, I'm just like, you know way more about it than I do. But, like, from my general perspective, I would argue that, like, the Democrats or liberals initially were, more pro-Ukraine than I think Republicans came to be. And now it's almost like the opposite has occurred in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But the narrative was, if you take all race out of it and all like religion out of it, was that like there was like this strong invading nation like destroying like these oppressed peoples, like in Russia, like with Ukraine, even though that wasn't the case. And you still kind of like see them all flip their narratives when it comes to Israel. It's just really interesting, and it's like only one type of group of people wins, and it's not us, like with both the conflicts. So I'm just like is my general perspective wrong with that? Like, cause I'm not like I don't know all the.
I think it's more complicated than you let on. So let me just kind of like lay out kind of how I see it, which is the real prize in the Ukraine conflict is Europe, right? And we all kind of know that. Like the question of who dominates Europe, is it going to be America? Is it going to be Russia? Is it going to be China? Right? That's kind of the question. You know, I don't really believe that Brexit. I think basically Brexit ended the dreams of a European Union, and I'm not a huge believer in the European Union as a whole. Anyway, I think actually what we need those countries crewing up with the United States on values and basically going about it that way. So I've never really believed in the European Union as a kind of hedge against the United States. I just don't. I don't believe the EU is real. And I go to Europe, and when I go to France, I see Frenchmen. I don't see Europeans, right? Or I go to Germany, I see Germans. I don't see, Europeans. So I think the real question is who crews up with the United States in Europe, and who crews up with the Soviet Union or Russia, I guess, Russian Federation. And
Well, one thing I wanted to say was, I know, Charles, you're not a big supporter of Israel, so like I wasn't trying to say that you were specifically, but it just seems to me like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
No. Let me explain. Let me explain, because I think this is an important thing to understand. So we go first to the geopolitics, then we go to the micropolitics, okay? Because that's important. So the geopolitics is pretty simple, right? We have a situation in which interest rates are rising, and when interest rates are rising, you care more about resources than you do about ideology or isms or other bullshit, basically. You care a lot more about like the wheat fields of Ukraine or the pipelines of Ukraine than you do, or about the gas fields of Ukraine than you do about say some like weird religion where people like sit next to a wailing wall and like say a bunch of bullshit, right? So in a high interest rate environment, people don't move money as readily. And so when people don't move money as readily, the mob can kind of make less money. So a high interest rate is always and everywhere an anti-mob play. And so what that does is it forces the mobsters to act in very violent ways, or the oligarchy to act in very violent ways. Because the way a lot of oligarchs make money is by basically collecting a toll over societal disruptions, right? So you can think of Putin's invasion of Ukraine in this context of he wants to control eastern Ukraine, he wants to control, the pipelines into Turkey. Basically you can think of the fights within Turkey as a kind of desire to turn Turkey into an oligarchy. So there's this sort of fight that's going on between the oligarchs and like the Western sense-making apparatus, Intel deep state kind of world, and that's kind of the fight that we're in across the board. Now, I think the stakes in Ukraine are much higher than the stakes in Israel. Like Israel could cease to exist tomorrow, and it would not. It would probably have a positive outcome on the living standards of most Americans, just being blunt about it. Because we wouldn't send as much foreign aid to them. It's not clear that they actually protect us, right? There have been many cases of them having intelligence knowledge ahead of time about various attacks on us and not sharing it with us. There's many examples of them using Pegasus and other spy hacking tools against Americans and against American assets and interests. So I just don't, I've never really believed that the Israelis are our friends or are an ally of ours. Now, it's possible the Ukrainians aren't either, but it's also possible that Ukraine becomes a bulwark, Ukraine and Poland become bulwarks for US interests in Europe. And I think that that's definitely the case in Poland. And it certainly seems to be becoming the case in Ukraine, assuming they can get rid of a lot of their oligarchs and their criminals that are operating there. Now, in the case of Israel, the problem in Israel is just really simple. Um, it costs the US too much in terms of geopolitical prestige, and it costs the US too much in terms of our relationships with both the Muslim world and the Arab world. And the Muslim and Arab world are increasingly super important when it comes to things like, energy, when it comes to things like consumption in their own rights, when it comes to things like dealing with Africa and other parts of the world. So we sort of need the Muslim world and the Arab world much more than we need the Israelis. But there's a legacy of all these relationships that exist, and that legacy continues to play. So, you might have noticed, like, if you go and you look at that, a lot of children are dying in Gaza, right? So the Muslim world is in general much younger than the Israeli world, and you look at places like Turkey, a NATO ally, second largest army in NATO, right? One of the most agriculturally rich places in the world. They are, their population is a lot younger than the Europeans, right? So the world belongs to those who are much younger. Whether people like to admit it or not, I think is an open question, but it is what it is. And so, from my perspective, just looking at it just kind of dispassionately, the Israelis cost us too much. They're not really useful as an ally. Now, they try to make it very costly for us to move away from them by blackmailing our politicians, like, what they tried to do with Matt Gaetz, or what the whole Jeffrey Epstein was all about, or by basically compromising our various billionaires, having them work for them, which is about, what a lot of the stuff around Peter Thiel is about, and certainly about Musk, having those conversations with Netanyahu. So that's kind of where things are. Is they are a blackmail mafia state. They are not really a democracy in any meaningful sense of that term, and they patented themselves off of the Weimar Republic, and that led to, the Hitler, situation in Germany, and the same thing is kind of, in my view, happening with respect to Netanyahu and Israel. Now, there's a lot of people who believe, and they're staking bets that they can get rid of Netanyahu and that the world will return. But there's 700,000 settlers now in the West Bank. It's pretty obviously an apartheid state by any definition, legal or otherwise, international or otherwise. And the hope that a lot of the Israelis have and a lot of their allies have is that we'll basically look the other way on the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, that we'll have a kind of exemption to the American ideas of human rights, of dignity for all peoples, law and order, law and justice, that will basically have the Palestinian exemption. And that is basically where we are right now. Is the question is, does the United States actually believe in these things, or does it have a big Israel-Palestine exemption to them? And my view is that the strength of the United States is that shining city on a hill, that promise of everybody to have dignity and equality before the law. The reason that so many people try to transact in the dollar, so many people try to come to the United States, so many people set up companies with Delaware corporations and all the rest of it. The reason they avail themselves of our institutions is because our institutions actually try to be free and fair and impartial. Now, I think when we basically excuse racism, which is what Zionism is, if we're just honest about it, When we excuse that kind of thing, or we lie to ourselves that it's actually in our interests, what we're really doing is we're really showing our ass to the world. And I think it ultimately makes us less secure. Now, back in the day, you could make an argument that the Israelis were helpful to us in different ways when it came to the Soviet Union. I don't really buy that argument. I've always been skeptical of that argument. And I posted earlier, a documentary about all the Russian mafiosos, many of whom were Jews, of course, who then moved from Russia to Israel and became Israeli citizens, and they became backers of Netanyahu in the 1990s. So the kind of view that people have of Israel, of Ben Gurion, of all these smart people, Moshe Dayan, right, all these smart early Ashkenazi Jewish settler types braving the conflict and basically being useful in all these ways. I just don't really buy any of that stuff. And so my view, for what it's worth, is I think that whole story is fake. And I believe that the founding of the state of Israel is actually not a joyous thing, but it's actually a place to warehouse a lot of the world's Jews. And I subscribe to the M plan. Like the M plan, it was the idea that FDR had, which was is that we would resettle the Jews among all the civilized countries in the world, and he was sort of opposed to Zionism. And indeed, many of FDR's Jewish supporters were opposed to Zionism. And indeed, many of Henry Ford's Jewish supporters, and yes, there were Jewish supporters of Henry Ford, used to describe themselves as proud American Jews. And my view is that the home for the Jews is in the Western countries, and that there are lots of Jewish Americans that contribute mightily to the success of the United States. And I think, my old Jewish professor, Harry Jaffa, who was of the Claremont world, by the way, he would have been disgusted at the direction Claremont's taken now. Harry Jaffa had this view that basically, he talked a lot about George Washington being the first secular leader to refer to Jews as his countrymen when he talked to the group at the Newport synagogue. So my view, for what it's worth, is that I think we committed a major error by basically allowing Israel to exist. And the reason we did that was because of concerns about terrorism, a desire, the Stern Gang and the whole Menachem Begin and all of that, that there was basically this effort to found this country through assassination, through criminality, and that basically we need to fix that. And that what's happened over the last, 60, 70 years is that we've allowed Israel to get nuclear weapons, which they've largely stolen from the United States and from other countries who've stolen key technology. And we've allowed them to have this kind of nuclear blackmail threat over the whole of the Middle East. And I think that has had drastic consequences for peace in the region and indeed peace in our own world. And, no Palestinian has hacked my phone. No Palestinian. I mean, the worst thing a Palestinian has ever done is made me a kebab that I didn't like, right? To me personally. And I would just say that, the Palestinians are not as advertised. Like, they are not a threat. They are not. They are not a real problem, except for those who want to ethnically cleanse them. And I think we should think about this in this context, right? There's a whole generation of young people that have effectively grown up under an occupation as Palestinians. And they are sick of that shit. They are sick of living under that and living in that way. And I want you to think about how you would feel if you were growing up in that kind of environment where your options for mobility are limited, your options for employment are limited, you are, constantly maltreated by an occupying power. I mean, what would you do, right? I mean, we know what we would do. There are examples throughout our history of us overthrowing oppressors. The Third Amendment exists because British soldiers were basically effectively garrisoning themselves in the homes of Bostonians, right? This was a thing that actually happened, and happened actually, in fact, to my family, to my descendants, or to my ancestors, and so we basically thought that was wrong. And in Gaza and the West Bank and elsewhere, there are lots of examples of Israelis living in the homes of Palestinians. So I think when we kind of think about this stuff more and more, we sort of have this problem that we keep getting confronted with. And the thing that we keep getting confronted with is that in order for our institutions to work, in order for our society to operate, we have to get rid of these kind of exemptions, these kind of racist Zionistic exemptions to our founding creed and the way we operate as a society. And I think that that's just this is something that we're going to have to deal with as time goes on. But yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I mean that was pretty killer. Like you did a good job. You mentioned the economics of it, and that lead me to one question. He wrapped it all up. When he wrapped it all up, it kind of like led me to believe that like, and I know you're different than most Democrats for sure, because I would
I'm
say,
not a Democrat, by the way. I think I'm still a registered Republican. I haven't voted since.
well,
Yeah. I mean,
I'm sorry,
basically, I'm
Democrat.
probably
You know what
going to. I'm probably going
I
to.
like
I'm
liberal
probably going to
end, right?
register. Just for what it's worth, I'm probably going to register as a Democrat in the near future, just because I live in Virginia now, and I think it's like when I lived in Texas, I was a Republican just because the Texas primary mattered a lot. When I lived in California, I lived in a Republican area, so I voted, Republican. When I lived in Massachusetts, I was an independent and a Democrat before that. So I kind of bounce around on these issues. Uh, Candidly, I don't really like any of the political parties. I think the political parties should work for me rather than me for them.
No, I agree completely, but I guess
By the way, you asked me a question though. Let me just answer your question because I was talking for a bit, but let me just kind of you know, the Peter Beinart quote that I put up at top, I think that that is a very useful way of thinking about this, which is that the Republican Party is effectively a pro-Israel party, and they are effectively a pro-settler party. On the Democratic Party side of things, things are a lot more fluid and a lot more dynamic, and there's a lot more internal debate and internal tension. And I support there being a debate about this issue across parties. And I'm very much in favor of that going forward. Now, I think the Republican Party as a whole has a big problem, which is that it's effectively a mob party in addition to being a pro-Israel party. And if you look at the way in which the Republican Party has financed itself, it's through the construction mobs, the banking finance sector, which rely on lower interest rates during the, basically during the kind of, since '07 to '08. The kind of like, slave power, which is what I would describe like the fast food industry, and of course natural resources, right? The kind of like oil lobby, all of those efforts, right? And I just think increasingly that coalition is breaking down and has to break down. And so if you look at the role of the Israelis in all three of those or all four of those kind of places, right? And the kind of way in which they control and mob up our energy sector, our big tech sector, uh, you start to notice certain problems, right? Certain big issues that make it so that the viability of the Republican Party is just not really possible, right, going forward. And so I think we're going to enter into a period of kind of de facto Democratic dominance. There might be some exceptions here and there in the country, and indeed there may well be regional variations because some states are more mobbed up than others. So, like, I think Florida is going to remain a heavy Republican state. Some people here might disagree with me there, but I think it's going to basically be a place in which all of the boomers, fuck off to after like selling their kids down the river. I think they're all going to basically move down to Florida and enjoy the sunshine as the hurricane comes and sweeps them away. So that's kind of and then of course New York is a heavily mobbed up place, but I think that's to some extent being cleaned up by people like Letitia James and AOC. And so that's kind of how I see things going on. And a lot of the problem in general is that the Democratic Party has all this incumbency going on. So, you have Chuck Schumer, who's been there for forever, and Chuck Schumer is very much, on the super pro-Israel side of things. But he's not anywhere near where the Democratic Party is currently. If you look at where the base is, where the voters are, they're all increasingly moving in an Israel skeptical direction, if not to outright hostility.
so like doing a cost benefit analysis. What you're saying is like the way I'm looking at it is like this: like we're depleting our weapon stockpiles for Ukraine and Israel both. But you're saying to me that when we deplete them for Ukraine, it helps us more than hurts us. When we do so for Israel, it hurts us more than helps us. But like domestically, do you think like it increases like production and research and development for America as a
Oh
whole?
no, not at all. And in fact, the Israelis constantly are stealing things from the U.S. and then repackaging and reselling them. And I myself have had this happen to me in various companies that I've been engaged in. No, the Israelis are very good at identifying geniuses or promising American talents and co-opting them or exploiting them in different ways. Indeed, I think you could make a case that that's entirely what Epstein was up to. And to some extent, that operation continues today with the Teal network and with other players out there. So, I'm generally opposed to that kind of thing. And I
That
must
makes
tell
sense.
you,
That makes sense on the Israeli side. I'm with you there, but on the Ukrainian side, you think
oh, the Ukraine thing is more interesting.
right?
So
Yeah,
Ukraine operates on many different levels. So there's one level in which, like, okay, so people are like, all right, we're giving billions of dollars to the Ukrainians. Well, for one, a lot of these things are loans. Some of them are grants, but a lot of them are loans. And a lot of them come after you saw when our debt ceiling was increased. Who bought a lot of our debt? That was Korea and Japan. So, in a certain sense, what happened was Korea and Japan offered to buy more US debt, and they got US dollars, and then they're reinvesting that into our economy in different parts of the country, right? Through real estate, through new clean energy projects and the like. And of course, when they do that, it's basically they give us the money that in turn we give to the Ukrainians. Now it's not perfectly correct. There's some exceptions to that, but that's kind of what's going on now. There are no American forces deployed in Ukraine, right? No trigger pullers like yourself or others. People going over from Massachusetts or North Carolina. No Texas boys are being shot up in Ukraine. And in fact, what's happening more or less is that Ukraine is being massively underpopulated, right? Their women and children are going to Europe. They're basically living there. The men folk are either dying or sort of staying behind, and there's a huge population kind of transfer going on. Now, Ukraine has a lot of things going for it. It has a lot of resources. It has a lot. I mean, it has a very low but highly educated labor force. What's going to likely happen is that Ukraine will be subsumed by Turkey, right? And that's going to be the story that plays out, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years. So if you just look at a map of the Ottoman Empire, circa like 1750, you get a real sense of like what the future of the Middle East may look like. And my view about this is that having these empires, which is really, if you think about like, all right, so high interest rates they drive less consumption, but they lead to more government and more investment. So they get like that's typically what you end up seeing. So you see these large empires that form in those kind of environments. And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to see increasing empires form, like the Turkish Empire, like the Russian Empire. I think will be newly renewed in terms of its strength, and of course with the you see this with the Chinese as well. So, and we're sort of the American Western Empire is sort of like that. That's sort of where we are now. I think the basic problem there's a lot of problems with being an empire, but I think that the macroeconomics kind of force us in that direction, whether we like it or not. And so, if we are an empire, the question then becomes: what kind of technologies do we build? What kind of weapons do we build? And Ukraine is a kind of proving ground for a lot of our technology. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I have a number of companies that are deployed in Ukraine, and I've been invited to go to Ukraine in December, though I'm not sure as yet whether or not I'll go. I'm sort of like mulling that over and talking to my family about whether or not that's a wise decision or not. I'm inclined to go. They're inclined for me to stay, for what it's worth. So I think I may. I think I may go. I'm not sure yet. But basically, the stakes of the Ukraine conflict are very high. And if Ukraine is brought into the Western alliance, kind of away from the oligarchs, away from the mobsters, away from the Kremlin, away from that kind of like mobbed up way, and it becomes a kind of like normal European state, those are admittedly big ifs, by the way. If the United States can do that, I think it's going to change for the better our posture vis-a-vis Europe as a whole. And I'm of that view that that needs to happen. So that's kind of how I look at it. And I think that that's kind of how we're going to go about it. Now, do I think that it's going to be perfect? No. Do I think there's going to be lots of stolen things from, the Ukrainian government's going to steal a lot of things? Of course, they're Ukrainians. But the new defense minister is a Tatar. It's unclear to me if Zelensky will always be in charge. Maybe there'll be somebody else who comes up who's a more reliable U.S. proxy. Kind of like Turkey. Erdogan was not a huge fan of the United States, but then you look at like who his intelligence minister is. You look at a lot of the people who are part of his finance minister. His government is basically moving in a very pro-American direction. And I think you see that across the world where the leader, the official head of state, may be publicly anti-American, but or American skeptic, right? But his, his staff, all the rest of those people tend to be very pro-American.
No, that makes sense to me a little bit. Like, kind of like definitely spilled it all out. So to just sum it all up, like basically what you said in so many different ways and using so many different examples, that the reason you support the war in Ukraine is because it benefits American more, not just through, it cost us. Well, I thought you said it cost us both, like in weapons depletion and production, but at the same time, there's more to gain with
Yeah, I mean, I think the
supporting
stakes.
Ukraine than there is supporting Israel.
The way I would put it is, I think the stakes are higher and the prize is larger in Ukraine than it is in Israel.
Yeah, I mean, like, what does Israel give us other than a threat? And then, like, I guess, like, I don't know exactly what resources Ukraine provides, other than like maybe like fertilizer and agricultural, like,
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine feeds Africa. They
yeah,
feed Africa to a large extent. And
yeah.
if Africa is unstable, which is what the Russians want, then there's all these people moving north to Europe and destabilizing Europe. And that is the intent, ultimately, of the Russians, to destabilize Europe. That's an objective of theirs.
So to sum it up, you support it because it's more of like not only from like a national security issue, not just because of resources, but because of you know holding down like lines, holding down Russia, but also because there's more of an economic benefit.
Yeah, the
And
future I imagine, in the future that I see is, I see, the Black Sea being effectively a Turkish lake, and I see the Eastern Mediterranean being dominated by the Turkish Navy and patrolled with American satellites, and I see basically North Africa, there being a kind of wall created by Turkish and American and French forces, either through space, largely through space, not exclusively, and basically that wall kind of keeps and protects Europe, as a kind of like de facto colony of the United States.
no,
That's,
I'm sorry to like.
no, that's kind of how I see it, and I
No,
think.
it makes sense to me. I didn't mean to like, not talk about politics. I'm sorry. I was just, the first conversation when I read today, I was
Oh,
like,
by the way, the Rashida Tlaib resolution just passed in the House. For those who are paying attention at home, thank you, Dana, for sending that to me. I'll put that up in the jumbotron.
is that where they're trying to ban like the Palestinian speaker or no?
They want to censure the Palestinian member of Congress, the only Palestinian member of Congress. So, yeah, speaks for itself. Speaks for itself. Yeah, let's see. 22 Democrats voted, and four GOPers voted nay. I wonder who the Republicans are that voted no. Does anyone know? I guess it was an anonymous count. So, but yeah.
Hey, would it be crazy to wonder if Moskowitz was one that voted for it on the Democratic side?
Oh, well, he of course was. I think he
No
said he was going
way.
to. I know you're shocked given that he's such a criminal. But let's go to Brennan and then Andy.
Charles, just counterpoint on the Ukraine thing. A lot of the Ukrainians that I knew whenever I was there were actually heading to Moscow. Now, Ukraine, if you read the Western media, it's all this war for independence and all this other different stuff, which is basically a lie. And the reason why is there's this cultural and linguistic split in Ukraine. If you're in the West in Ukraine, I swear you're in continental Europe, and you head to the east, and suddenly you're in Little Russia, and it is so true, and that is how they see themselves in a fundamental way. That I think they were a lot more honest, like before the rumblings for war started, and many of the people that I knew in Ukraine now live in Moscow. Um, so I think that's what's.
I don't necessarily, I don't necessarily agree with that. Obviously, I think it's much more complicated than as you've laid out. I mean, I've been to Crimea and I've been to Kiev, and yeah, it's true that Crimea was, when I was there, it was effectively like kind of a Russian outpost. But my experience of Crimea is that they all wanted to be paid Russian wages but have Ukrainian prices. And I think that there's a lot of these places there's a lot of places in Europe that have a more complicated relationship with the Russians, right? Whether it's Estonia, I mean, you could go down the list of countries that have a sizable Russian minority, and those areas I think are much more complicated. But then I think you kind of led on there. There's also a lot of Russians too that have ethnic Russians that have chosen to prove their loyalty to the Ukrainian state by fighting alongside the Ukrainians. So I think it's a much more complicated picture, and there are lots of examples of countries that are kind of multi-ethnic. I mean, Ukraine is one such. I mean, it's a relatively large country. I mean, as I mentioned before, they have a defense minister that's a Tatar, so kind of an ethnic Turk. And then you have Zelensky, who's a Jew, and then you have a lot of members of his government that are ethnic. You have a few that are ethnic Russians, and you have a few that are ethnic Ukrainians. So I think it's nations contain multitudes.
Yeah, I think that one of the other things too, in terms of Turkish domination, uh, my impression is that there's kind of like this element of there's a racial element there in Ukraine that I've observed, and it seems to be very hostile to the Turks, but at the same time very very friendly to the Russian republics. It's kind of it's
Oh no, 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 no,
it's
no.
it
No,
is there.
in fact, on the contrary, no, no. I mean, I don't know where you're getting your information from, but there's a whole lot of strong support for the Turks in the Navy there in Ukraine. I mean, there's examples after examples of them doing pop songs praising Bayraktar. No, no, no. I think you're pushing a little misinformation there. So I'm gonna bring you down. And when you have something kind of more constructive to push, um, we'll happily have you back up. But no, we're not really going to go with that Russia stuff tonight. Let's go to Andy real quick.
Hey Charles, thanks for having me up. Yeah, I wanted to ask about the recent, I guess it was about a week ago, maybe a little longer, Time magazine story that basically signaled ostensibly that there seemed to be some indication from Blinken State Department that that there was a desire to reach some sort of peace settlement with Russia, but by way of U.S. proxy.
I didn't quite catch that
You
last
know,
bit, Andy. Look, there's obviously the U.S. government wants the Ukraine war to end. Officially it wants it to end. Now, unofficially, who knows, right? It's a great place to test out a lot of weapons
well, no. So my question was though, like, is there is indeed that Time story any indication on the part of the State Department that there is a desire to end the Ukraine war in some sort of peace settlement, or is that some sort of propagandistic fiction?
I mean, I think people always make peace overtures, right? The question is, what should the terms of the peace be? And that we don't really know.
Yes, yes.
So,
So just to clarify, the Time magazine piece, which whether or not like this is propaganda,
who owns Time magazine?
that's a good question. I don't know.
Come back to me with who owns Time magazine. Let me see if you can do some real media inquiry first.
Okay,
So,
sure.
all right, let's go ahead, Rafaela.
Hi guys. I'm listening that you're talking about the relationship between United States, Ukraine, Israel, Russia. Well, one thing that no one is talking about is South America, the backyard of United States. Um, what's happening here? We lost it, our continent. We don't have freedom here. You can see Colombia, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, Mexico, are all being government ruled by the cartels, by the socialists, the Castro Chavism. So we lost it, our continent, and the Biden administration does not care about it. They supported Lula, and obviously this is a treat for America for
Yeah,
the
I mean, I'll explain because
war free.
I think there's a lot of things here that. So, by the way, I'm a huge fan of yours, despite disagreeing with pretty much everything you believe in. For what it's worth, I think you make a strong, impassioned case, and I like to see people make those things. But look, I mean, the truth of the matter is that Bolsonaro was very close to the Chinese and to the Netanyahu Israelis. There's
Yeah,
all kinds of
but
criminal
I do not
things.
support Bolsonaro because he caused the return of Lula. He
Well, of course he
betrayed
did
us.
because he was a criminal, right? And his family are a bunch of criminals, and they're engaged in a lot of criminal activity. So yeah, I agree with you.
Exactly.
But I think there's something to be optimistic about, which is that Lula, if you look at a lot of people in Lula's cabinet, many of them are very pro-American. I think his vice president is kind of
But
a
the
pro.
Lula cabinet, they impose a ridiculous thing. They impose equality for ratio. This is a shame. Like, I don't like it. And obviously, right now, Latin America is supporting China, Cuba, Venezuela, and right now Venezuela will invade Guyana this year in December. So we are going to start a war here in Latin
Well, I mean,
America.
Venezuela is a desperate country right now because one of the last things President Kushner did was he sanctioned Venezuela, which I was totally opposed to at the time. And,
I like the way you talk. Like,
I mean, I think
who is
that
the real president?
yeah, I mean, it was what it was, right? I mean, he sanctioned him, and he sanctioned Venezuela because he wanted to do a favor to the Chinese, and many of the people, the desperate people who were in Venezuela, had no choice but to come to the United States or to go to Brazil or go elsewhere where they could earn a
Yeah,
living and live. And the first order of business, I think, is to try to bring Venezuela back into our region.
exactly.
I think we also need to be honest about all of the Israeli misbehavior in Latin America. You know,
Well,
you saw what happened in Colombia, where the president got rid of a lot of the Israeli
Gustavo
gangs,
Petro.
yes, that were running all of the drugs and everything into the United States. So look, I have a lot of hope, for Brazil in particular, and I think that that Israeli fuck who was trying to be president of Argentina is going to lose. So I'm very happy about.
He's a puppet. Like, the
Yes.
people doesn't know who is his parent. His parent, no, his cousin. He has the same surname than BB. Is real. I'm not lying. I'm not lying. They have the same surname. He's a scam. I prefer the third candidate, a woman. She was better. She was so much
Yeah, I mean,
better.
look, I think the future of Latin America is going to be a lot of female presidents and female leaders because I think that the men there are so corrupt and messed up in all these different ways, and I think we are ready for real female leadership. I mean, the trial of Alejandro Toledo just began, I think, in Peru. He was a deeply corrupt guy who had the Israeli wife, Elaine Karp, who escaped to Israel while he's facing charges. Uh, there's lots of problems in Latin America. I don't talk about Latin America as much because I have
Yeah.
family that's
But
stationed
this guy
that's
from
stationed in Latin
Argentina,
America.
he has a support from a guy that is a friend of Soros. So I don't know if they're going to rig this election for him win. Well,
People always
the
talk about
immigrants,
Soros stuff, and I always say early Soros or late Soros, right?
the
Because
immigrants. Uh,
Soros is much more interest. There's a lot of things going on with Soros. Soros
yeah,
isn't just Soros. There are times in which Soros works for MI6. There are times for which Soros has worked for CIA, and there are times in which Soros has worked for Mossad. So the
the
question is that
immigrants,
people, what's that?
the immigrants. What's happening? A lot of Venezuelans, Brazilians, Peruvians, Mexicans are crossing the border, and people from Honduras, IT are crossing the border to go into the United States illegally, obviously, and with the socialist wave, they are we have a lot of unemployment. We don't have opportunity, so the people are running to the United States and doing illegal immigration. So this is a problem. If Venezuela wasn't socialist in a poor country, it probably wouldn't have a lot of people going to the United States.
I think it's more complicated than just socialism, not socialism. I think the problem is that you have these oligarchies in a lot of these Latin American countries where, when you travel within a lot of Latin America, you have the very, very rich and you have the very, very poor. And there's not really an effort to kind of build a middle class in any of these countries.
but does not exist middle class and rich people in Venezuela. They all flee to Europe, to other countries.
Yeah, everybody's trying to get the Spanish passport too. I've seen a lot of that over the years. I think it's a real crying shame. So I don't talk a lot about Latin America simply because I have a lot of family that's still stationed in Latin America. So I try not to talk about it, but it is something that I know quite a bit about, and I think I've been to all but two or no, maybe three Latin American countries. So I've been all throughout the region, and my experience basically traveling there is that there's not really a compelling vision that any of the leaders there have about what a great future could look like. It's always a fight over which oligarchy gets to steal from the public, whether it's the left one or the right one or whatever. And it's very depressing. I actually went to the inauguration of Alvaro Colom, who was the narco leader he was the narco guy in Guatemala. I went to his inauguration. I think it was it was in '07. And there I met Hugo Chavez and sort of spent time. And it was amazing just watching the press there, how they were sort of sycophantic towards Hugo Chavez and how they sort of like carried his every line. And what started to happen is a lot of the narco players would come in and they would buy up newspapers, they would buy judges, they would buy politicians. And I think that the role of the drug and criminal world in taking over a lot of these countries is a real problem. And it's something that I think we need as Americans to help clean up, not just by, changing trying to basically interdict a lot of the drug efforts, but also trying to like clean up a lot of these very criminal, corrupt countries. I think now that we've been indicting and prosecuting a number of politicians, that's all to the good. But I think we need to do more of that. And we have all these examples of Pegasus, all this technology being sold to Latin American leaders who use it against their enemies or against journalists in Mexico. I mean, what's happening in Mexico is just disgusting. The way in which the Israelis and the Chinese are playing in Mexico. So I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think it's maybe worth doing a space. I'm going to see what I'm allowed to talk about, but it's worth doing a space. By the way, I used to know your ambassador to the United States, Nestor Forster, the Brazilian ambassador. He was a very lovely gentleman, but he was a little crazy. He liked classical music, and we bonded over that. Very interesting man, but I think if Brazil starts to make some serious changes, I think it could be a very powerful country, but I think it has
Brazil should be separated.
You think Brazil should be separated from Latin America?
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, the Portuguese...
Not separated, but separate the states. Create another countries.
Maybe. Divide it up? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, divide.
Could be possible. I don't think the Brazilian government would like that much, but maybe.
They don't need to like it. We need a civil war.
Yeah, I think Brazil could well turn into a very dangerous kind of situation, but I don't know. It's worth thinking about. You're of course Tom asks if we can bring you to the United States, and I of course am always a fan of bringing attractive women to the United States. So that was Tom that suggested that. So I didn't suggest it, but that was all Tom, right, Tom?
Yes, correct. Excuse me, correct. Yes.
Yeah. The last
by the way, Charles,
hold on. The last Brazilian woman that I fell deeply in love with got knocked up by another man. So I'm going to avoid dating Brazilian women for a little bit, if that's all right with everybody here. Just as a private indulgence. Go ahead, Andy.
Oh yeah. I was just going to acknowledge your I guess perspicuity. Time Magazine is owned by Mark Benioff, who is
hold up. Who's Mark Benioff?
he is a Jewish Silicon Valley I guess like actor. What do you way to characterize him? He is a player.
Go deeper. Who is he?
Yeah, so he is a Jewish.
Where did he go to school?
Stanford, of course.
Nope.
Is that
not
wrong?
A part of the Stanford Mafia. Incorrect.
Wait, okay. Wait,
USC.
Mark Benioff was raised in a Jewish family in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was the grandson of Marvin Lewis, San California trial attorney, one time member of the San Francisco Board of Directors, and championed the creation of the bar system. Grew up in Hillsborough, graduated from Burlington High School.
Now, hold up. So what's
Bachelor of
important?
Science from
Where did he
University.
work? Where did he work?
He is the cousin of showrunner Dave Benioff, known for Game of Thrones. Married Lynn Benioff, and he has 2 children. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. Career.
Hold on. Let me go into why this is important. So it's very important to understand that there are great divisions within the Jewish community and within the Jewish American community. And within the pro-Israel community, there's lots of divisions as well. And Benioff is a very interesting figure because Benioff comes up through the USC world, which is a very different, it's a Southern California world.
Well, it's important to note, Charles, every single dumb rich kid from Southern California goes to USC.
Yep. So think about that. Is this Stanford? No. Is it Caltech? No. Is it Berkeley? No. It's USC. And it's USC, I think he's in his late 50s now, if memory serves. And it's USC, from a while back, right? So this is a guy who, that's kind of what he comes out of. Now, why does this matter? Well, he comes out of the Oracle world, and Oracle back in the day was Oracle was very Jewish CIA affiliated. And I think it's fair to say that to a large extent, that's kind of what Benioff comes out of. He's a World Economic Forum guy, not to make anybody go crazy, but that's what he is. And he started Salesforce, which he built up basically since the 1990s. He's basically built up this powerful thing, which is basically monitoring the whole of all these transactions that take place. It's a kind of listening post.
By the way, notably, anybody that's ever actually used Salesforce as a corporate salesperson has found it completely useless and usually counterproductive.
Yeah, so ask yourself why they still buy it.
Well, because it's a monitoring service, really.
It's a monitoring service. It's not unlike Michael Bloomberg, right, who was the Bloomberg terminals, which, do you think it would be useful for an intelligence service to know who was buying what stocks, right? Of course it would be, right? And Bloomberg's privately held. So what did Benioff do? Benioff bought Time magazine, and Benioff is a kind of, he's kind of the mob done good Jewish world. That's kind of what he comes from. He's got family in the entertainment industry, which you just mentioned. He's, that's sort of what he comes out of, right? And of course, his grandfather was, as you mentioned, a trial lawyer, right? Very important detail there. But of course, they were also civically minded trial lawyers. So he pushed things like massive public transportation, the whole BART system. So he's kind of this kind of network here that is kind of civically engaged Jewish American.
Well, Charles, this raises the question.
Now, hold on. This is important.
Okay, sorry.
I'll cue you when you can talk. So what we're talking about here when we talk about Salesforce is we're talking about Salesforce was raided recently. Salesforce was attacked recently by a venture capitalist, right? A vulture capitalist, I should add, by the name of Paul Singer. Billionaire Paul Singer is the latest activist.
Vulture capitalist of all vulture capitalists.
Correct. Who, by the way, is messing about all the time in Latin America.
And who funds Manhattan Institute, among other organizations.
There you go. And of course, billionaire. Let me just read this. I'll cue you in. Don't worry. Salesforce manages to avoid proxy fight with Paul Singer. So they basically gave Paul Singer a seat at the table, right? Okay. Now, Singer has all kinds of connections with Netanyahu. Singer has all kinds of connections with the Russian oligarchy, the Russian Jewish oligarchy in particular. And that's kind of what Singer comes out of. So you can kind of see this fight as a fight between these kind of things. Oh, so now we're getting the Republicans who voted no to censure. They are Ken Buck, of course, Duarte of California, Tom McClintock, and Thomas Massey. So those are the 4 that voted against censuring.
By the way, Charles, even my relatively amoral private equity friends all those bro dudes describe Paul Singer as one of the most amoral and powerful operators in the sphere.
Now, it's important to note when we talk about Mark Benioff, what did Mark Benioff recently do? Right? I put this up in the Jumbotron. Somebody sent this to me, but I think it's an important thing to note. Benioff swore off all political donations after 2020. Now, you saw Peter Thiel swear off all political donations after 2022. And you're increasingly seeing lots of billionaires suddenly decide not to spend money on politics. Now, do you think that that's the deep state playing and encouraging them to stop messing about in our elections? I do. So that's kind of, I think, an important thing to think about.
Well. Just consider the counterfactual, right? Like, if the deep state wasn't on their shit, who else could pressure them to behave?
Maybe they're shareholders, right? That's a possibility, right? But I think you're quite right. I think it's the U.S. deep state pushing them and prodding them in different directions.
There's only one entity on the earth that can actually like impose, like, I guess, like, the fear of God into these vulture
By the
capitalists,
way,
and that is the U.S. government.
I agree. And I think that building up the U.S. government is an extremely important thing to do. But there's something I think that's useful here. Um, I think Ryan Grimm has the best line of the night. Star is false, just a little side hustle about Susanna Gibson. I think we'll share that one up.
By the way, Charles, you know who I am, dude. I actually have a fair amount of information about Manhattan that I can share with you. Off of this space, that might be
Yeah,
might be of interest to
to
you.
do that, we're going to remove you from the speakers because you keep interrupting me, and I've talked to you about this in the past. So we'll queue you up. If you want to come back up, you can raise your hand and be good. And by the way, if anyone else wants to come up, we'll do this for another 30 minutes or so. But I do think in general, yeah, people have information on some of these topics. We'll kind of go to them as well. I think one thing I would say, so um, we just saw Rashida. We saw tonight too that there was that we saw a lot of very interesting changes tonight, and the Republicans seem to have lost the House of Delegates as well, which is, I think, an extremely important thing to pay attention to. I think that is very, very useful to understand. So yeah, I think basically we just saw the end of Glenn Youngkin as a serious political figure, which is just as well. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
He'll have to take his sweater vest home and retire it. It's his uniform.
I have my tweet that I like about him is he's an empty sweater vest.
That's perfect.
I think it's pretty clear that the Republican Party just basically decided it was the pro-Israel party and nothing else.
Yeah, they're basically an extension of the Knesset.
Yeah, I think that's.
They don't have any other ideas, and they only do things that are in service to the state of Israel and the oligarchs that fund it. That's it. They do not stand for anything else. They don't have any other ideas. They are completely worthless, dangerous, actually.
How did Gates vote on the censure? Did he vote to censure her, or did he vote? Was he not present?
I haven't seen that yet. I bet he would be voting for censure, though. I mean,
God,
it's
that would be so disappointing if he voted to censure her.
but unsurprising. He's become uh, like a like a Lakudnik.
Well, I think he wants to. Oh, look how close it is. It looks like our girl is up 900 votes. Susanna Gibson is up 900 votes. Oh, yes, Gates voted yay.
She's gonna go hard all the way to the finish, Charles.
Yep. I like her. I like her. I like her. I wish her well. Gibson, let's go Gibson. How's it going, Adam?
Good. How are you guys all doing?
Good.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's good to hear from you guys. Always interesting. But I was gonna ask you guys, like, what does the censure actually mean, like in real terms? Because it always just seems like one of
It
those.
basically
It's like
means
they
that
disapprove. I
she's
mean,
naughty. It means that she's naughty. It doesn't
yeah,
mean
it
that
doesn't
she
mean
gets kicked
anything,
out.
right? Am I nuts?
It's a messaging.
Okay, right.
It's like a strongly
Okay,
worded
right.
letter that everybody votes on and agrees to.
Yeah. So you were saying how
Yes.
But a little
useless
bit,
they are. They don't. That's kind of all they do, right?
yes,
Like they sign off on the budget and then they make strongly worded letters about whatever they're pissed about. The FBI did this or
yes,
whatever they're talking about on Fox, right?
right. And they do bring out like fake whistleblowers, and then they don't interview, like they don't bring in like real whistleblowers. Jonathan Buma. I mean, they're a joke. I mean, they operate for foreign entities. That's it. They don't do anything that's in the actual interest of our country. And then they play identity politics mostly about, well, we got to fight woke. What the fuck? Barf. I could care less. I mean, it just, at this point, it's so pathetic.
It is deeply entertaining, though. I've got to tell you, Tom.
Yeah, I mean I can't look
Yeah, it's
away.
like
I hate that I can't stop
traveler
watching all of
football.
it. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's pretty great watching this. You know, yeah. I mean, almost all of the polls today, uh, basically were correct. So, Iglesias points out pre-election polls showed Bashir winning, showed abortion rights winning in Ohio, showed Democrats ahead in VA legislative generic ballot poll. The polls were correct, just across the board. So I think we're in a very interesting moment, just politically.
Well, I mean it kind of just you guys had said like a couple months ago, like the GOP is barely like a functioning entity, right? Like it's broke in many places, and yeah, like it doesn't. My thing was like it's they can only win arguments now. The GOP can maybe win an argument, but they can't really win an election anymore, right? It feels like it's just kind of over.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only hope I think the Republican Party has is in nominating somebody that. Look, I think Trump's going to go to jail
Yeah,
between now and the election. So then the question is, who is the Republican nominee going to be? And I think it's pretty much they're going to lose, like whoever it is,
yeah.
against Biden.
I don't understand why. Is it like a fundraising thing that the New York Times is saying? Oh, now Trump is going to beat Biden because that just doesn't seem.
No, if you look at the crosstabs of those polls, like if you actually like genuinely look into them, there's like lots of liberals that are the reason his polling, excuse me, is down.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where we are on that. It's like there's a lot of people who are pissed off at how the president's handling
Yeah,
the Hamas Israel conflict.
yeah,
And I got to tell you, like I've been thinking about it. I've been going back and forth on it. Like I am pretty pissed off that Biden is not being more forceful than Netanyahu, and with the Netanyahu assets in the United States. But compared to what? Like if we were in the second term of the Jared Kushner presidency, it's very possible we'd have American troops marching on Tehran right now.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
you know, things can always be pretty terrible.
Yeah,
So I think that's kind of useful to think about.
yeah. I mean, the war with Iran is like it's clearly part of their long-term plan. It kind of feels like it doesn't matter. Like even if it's DeSantis and by some miracle he got in, like he's clearly on board to march on Tehran, right?
Yeah, I just think the Republican Party doesn't have a future.
Yeah.
until it fixes itself. Let's go to Book of Cyril.
Hey, I was gonna say I saw a lot of a lot of like the establishment GOP types that were talking about how this proves that Trump needs to be off the ticket. And in some ways, I kind of think that if you want to destroy the Israeli, Chinese, Russian side of the GOP, you kind of need Trump because he'll just implode all of it on the right, and then that's
Oh, I'm totally with you. I was having this very conversation at lunch the other day. That my attitude is I hope Netanyahu stays for as long as necessary to rid ourselves of the entire Netanyahu network in the United States.
so. How does that work?
So
How do you envision it playing out?
So my view is that the venture funds, the private equity funds, pretty much all of these people outing themselves as Netanyahu assets, I think all of that is very, very useful right now. And so I want it to go on as long as possible. And hopefully it will basically, they'll reveal themselves over the next 6 months or so. And hopefully, we can have a resounding defeat of Likud in the 2024 elections. I happen to think, though, that it would be kind of too elegant in a way to defeat Trump at the polls. And that basically what we need to do is kind of defeat him in as many arenas of America as possible, the courts, the polls, etc.
But I think you need Trump to defeat all of the Likud stuff. You actually
Oh, you think you need him just around so that you can vote against him, or
well
what?
notice how he kind of started distancing himself, away from Bibi and like calling him out too, right? Like he's doing that for a reason, is he not?
I think he's doing it just because he likes to pick fights with strong people or weak people. And by the way, I happen to think, I think Dana is totally right about Biden giving, isn't Biden giving billions to Israel, setting up the Republicans to expose how they are money laundering with Netanyahu? Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like a lot of that money is, of course, washed back into the U.S., right? Like they give that money to Netanyahu, and then he uses it to pay his assets in the U.S.
But like at no point in history has that ever been prosecuted or anything's ever been done about it. And I
Well, there's
think
a first time for everything,
hold on.
Tom.
Now I understand, but like, let's not get on some sort of cope. I mean, there needs to be some action. They have to do something. They haven't done shit, and this kind of stuff has gone on for the last 50 years with absolutely no pushback
Yeah,
at
though
all.
in fairness, you and I have seen the issue change a lot, right? Just in the time in which you and I and Jeremy and others have been talking about this issue, right? Like things are moving very fast on the Israel issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Like we were seen
billions of
as kind of
dollars going
fringe
fast
people.
over to Israel and lots of weapons, and
No,
we're
but
over
but
there
but
like powdering their
we
ass
still
while
were
they
very
kill a bunch
fringe
of people.
on these issues maybe 6, 7 months ago. We're not so fringe these days,
That's true.
But
you
don't you
know.
guys also think it's partly because, I mean, I hate to, I mean, what Elon did with Twitter, obviously, like, there's been some good things, but like, generally, I don't really understand what he wants to do with it. But anyway, don't you think at the very least, like
Well, it's an
this,
influence. It's an influence op,
yeah,
right? I
yeah.
mean, that's what's going on.
But don't you
I
think
mean,
this war coverage is
Elon.
so different than it would have been? You know what I mean? Like the discussions we're
Elon,
seeing now,
look,
like people would never be able to talk about Israel and Jewish people the way is kind of, you know what I mean?
well, I mean, Elon is an oligarch, right? And oligarchs thrive off of disruption and chaos.
Yeah,
So he has no interest in information being policed on this platform. So because he has no interest in policing information on this platform, yeah, he just wants to benefit from the chaos. He also doesn't censor those of us who speak honestly and openly about Israel. So that's kind of where we find ourselves, you know?
Hmm. So, yeah, because the more, yeah, I mean, like he tweeted something during the first days of the war, like follow such and such accounts, you know, and it was almost like you could tell he was happy because they were having a good day and traffic was up because there was a war. You know what I mean? Like it was a little
Yeah, I
sick.
mean, Elon.
Like
Look, Elon is an amoral fuck, right? Like, I mean, I've met him. I could just tell you my experience of him. He doesn't do like normal empathy. Like he doesn't.
yeah,
He doesn't think of these things. Like he has no sense of like America as his home, and as a place that he has a responsibility to, right? He just doesn't. He doesn't operate that way, you know.
yeah,
And if you study him and take him seriously, like I mean, he's at the center of all these criminal networks, and he gets paid. They launder money through his rocket companies, or through his Neuralink, or through Tesla, or through whatever. So he's at the top of a lot of these geopolitical forces.
Right. And then the funny thing is, like, the right, it's like they go on and on about China and TikTok and all this stuff, and then Elon says, like, I'm going to take Twitter and turn it into the American WeChat, and they're clapping for him. And it's like, wait, I thought you guys were against this, right? Like us all having a social credit score or whatever the fuck. And then it's like he says he's building it, and everyone is just cool with that. I don't know.
Yeah, because I think that the right wants to be liked
So much.
so
They're
much.
so thirsty for it. It's so embarrassing, right?
Yeah, which is why it doesn't work.
Yeah. I saw Benny Johnson tweeted something about when that guy Johnson made, like, he was talking at some, like, house or fundraiser, and he did, like, a Trump impression, and he was like, hilarious moment with Speaker Mike Johnson. And I was just wondering, like, what is it? It must pay good to, like, talk like that and post like that with your real name. That's just so insane. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've met Benny Johnson over the years. He always gave me like strong gay vibes when I dealt with him.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of the guys who, he's a theater kid type. Like, that's kind of how he approaches life. He likes to be in front of the camera. He likes attention. He likes all those things. There's not really a lot of depth there to him, right? A lot of these guys, their vision, like the world that they want to live in is a world in which they're on camera being, fawned over on Fox News or whatever. And you'll notice that like everything I do is audio or written, right? Like there are very few examples.
Their job is to perform goy slop.
Yeah,
That's
it's
it.
goy slop, but it's more than goy slop. It's
Couldn't-
also like they preen, right? They're preening people, right? They are, the type that take pictures of themselves. They're not interested in ideas, right? Or the future or technology. They're just interested in basically sloganeering and cheerleading and, rah, 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 party boosterism. And people, that's just like not the future of the country, right? Like that's not, there's no heft there. There's nothing there. They're sort of empty vessels
Yeah.
for other people to pour their ideas into, you know? Let's go to Shepard Wolf, and then we'll go to Polly in a sec. By the way, the thing to understand just generally about the Republican Party, which I think a lot of people don't understand, is that many of these influencers are like bought and paid for effectively by foreign powers. So, the reason they sound so super pro-Israel is because many of them are on the Israeli payroll in one form or another, or de facto in different ways. So it's not, they're just prostitutes, right? They're not, many of them don't actually sincerely believe a lot of these ideas. And in fact, if you take Charlie Kirk, by himself, and you actually talk to Charlie Kirk, as I have over the years, Charlie Kirk, the person, is very different than Charlie Kirk, the persona. And in a certain sense, a lot of these people are imprisoned by this sort of thing. But anyway, go ahead, Shepard. Mr. Shepard, can you guys hear him?
I can't hear him.
No.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Mr. Shepard. Come back. We'll have you back up. If you drop down, we'll have you back up. Go ahead, Polly.
Good evening. So what do you think? I have a couple questions here regarding the Republicans and the presidency. Do you think people will shut up about Glenn Youngkin jumping in the race now, given
Well, many of the people who wanted him to
Yeah.
jump into the race did so because they wanted to make a bunch of money off of him.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think he wanted to make a bunch of money himself, but yeah, I think his career's pretty much over. So
I think his career was over when he won. I think the worst thing that ever happened to him was becoming governor of Virginia.
because they do they do 4 years, correct? And they can't do consecutive terms, but
That's
he
right.
could run again in
Yeah,
say
he can't.
28
He
or
could run in whatever it is in 27. He could run in 27 because it's off year. They're cycled off.
Also, do you think there's anyone, and I probably know the answer to this question, but do you think there's anyone who is running for president on the Republican side who would actually stand up to Netanyahu's Israel?
That is a great question. I think the only one who's capable of it is probably Christie,
I agree. Yeah.
because
I think he could.
Christie put Charles Kushner in jail.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I
think
think what's
Christie's
very
close to that.
likely is that we're going to learn a lot more about Netanyahu's involvement in the U.S. over the next, 3 to 6 months.
Hmm.
Apparently I'm echoing right now. I'll drop down and come right back. You got it, Tom.
Hey,
You're
can
in
you
charge.
can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, but I'm echoing, so I'm going to drop down and come right back.
Okay.
Tom's in charge. Go ahead, Tom. You have the bridge.
Yeah, go ahead, Shepard.
All right, sure will. Hey, thanks for letting me come up. I always enjoy this space. I always learn something in this space. It never fails. So kudos to everyone who attends these spaces. So talk about Daniel Cameron conceding for the Kentucky governor race. I think Daniel Cameron was a very unpopular candidate in the black community. He is the AG that refused to file charges on Breonna Taylor's murder by the Kentucky police. So he didn't have a base in the black community. So he really was unpopular in Kentucky just for that one thing. And then if you compound that one thing with his incessant love for Trump and his just kowtowing on every level for everything that Trump was doing, you have kind of a double whammy there. I think he should have lost by a lot more, but Andy Bashir's got some flaws as well. So that's my take on the Cameroon concession. In Virginia, I'm sorry. Did someone want to say something? Oh, I thought somebody was
No,
speaking.
go ahead, Shepard.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So in Virginia, so the Dems committed was a self harm in Virginia in the 20 the race that Youngkin won. They had four popular.
By
They
the way,
had
I've
three.
maintained, just for what it's worth, I've maintained that there was a deal that was struck between Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe. And then
Interesting.
McAuliffe actually won that election, but McAuliffe wanted access to a lot of the private equity funds
I wouldn't
that
doubt that he did.
the party.
He was Clinton's
Yeah,
money man.
I mean, if you look at it the next day, he like literally goes and joins all these private equity
Yep.
boards.
Yep. I
And
mean,
and
well,
if you look at
that's
the votes that were
yep.
outstanding, I've done the math on this, and I've had a lot of conversations with fellow data nerds, and we're kind of all of the opinion that there were enough outstanding votes, not even looking at the early votes, for McAuliffe to have won that election. But
I
he'd been
see that.
governor already. And if you look at what he's doing now, he's just cleaning up and making money. So I think there was actually a deal struck. So I actually
Okay.
don't
All
believe
right.
that he won the
Okay.
election. I think
So
he won it. He won it, but he won it because it was like an arranged deal, not because it
okay.
was an
All right.
actual election.
I'll give that some consideration from my
But that's
vantage
important.
point.
That's important because if you have this view of Glenn Youngkin as the future of the Republican Party, that's like dead tonight, right?
Yeah,
It's over.
which I don't have that view. So
Yeah,
from my
yeah.
perspective on, we know McCullough. I know him personally. I met him several times. We
I
know
have too. He's a
McCullough.
weird dude, isn't
Yeah,
he?
he
He's
is
a
a weird
strange.
dude. Yes, he is.
There's something about the type of hustler that ends up in politics that he is.
Yes,
He's
but
that kind of guy that could like persuade you to give up your last dollar to him.
yes,
He's like
yes,
that
yes.
kind of guy. Yeah.
Evangelical weird. Like
Yes. Yes.
he can con you out of
Yes.
shillings back in the days.
And like all good con men, he first cons himself, right?
Yes, to
So
believing his bullshit.
Yeah, I don't even think it's malicious. I just think that's how he is.
Yeah, I think all con men are sort of like that. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
in my experiences with him, well, not in my experience with him personally, but just from his history of being Clinton's bag man. I mean, the money he raised for Clinton on Clinton's impeachment, was astronomical, and Clinton's election. It was $67 million, and 67 million. If we fast track for what that is worth in today's money, is a lot. And he's just good at what he does. And so he's so good at raising money that he basically conned the black Democrat leaders in Virginia to go against Jennifer Foy and the state senator Jennifer McClellan, who were both better candidates than him. So he was running against four other candidates, who were all black, and he got the black establishment in Virginia to back him. That's how good a con man he is, and how a testament of how many deals he struck with the black community, the what I call the misleadership class in the black community in Virginia, who are more about power and influence and maintaining.
Yeah, I mean, he went to those like 20 black churches, and he got them all like to back him.
Yeah.
But I think the big problem he had is they didn't show up in the numbers he needed in
Well,
2021.
there's a reason for that.
And had
Jennifer Foy had a base. Jennifer McClellan, the state senator, and Jennifer Foy was a delegate. They both had huge bases in the real community, not in the money community. So yeah, definitely. So but my point to Virginia's election coming up now is that I believe it was self-inflicted. They had two good candidates that one of which could have beat Youngkin and become the first, could be the first black governor, or to in the state, the first black woman governor in the state, and they decided to go with Terry. So that was a mistake. Then Terry also it was involved with the same type of private equity scams that he accused a Youngkin of running, and he just really alienated people in Virginia that did not want to mess with him or come out to vote. So now that they have a slim majority in the House and a slim majority in the Senate, what are they going to do with this mandate? I mean, abortion can't be well, yes, it can actually. Abortion, Virginia is surrounded by southern states that are all abortion restricted states. So Virginia is the last hub in the South to protect abortion. But there are not that many people getting abortion. Like the proportionality of how many people actually get abortions and how many people actually advocate for this issue is way out of whack. It may be 16,000 people got an abortion in Virginia, and it's a huge issue regardless. It just doesn't kind of make sense from my perspective that this.
I think people don't they have a loss aversion to it,
Okay.
right? If you believe that you have a right and they can take a right from you, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about these things.
So Ken
I think that that's
Cuccinelli,
really how it's
Mr.
supposed to be.
Uterus, what did they call him? Ken the Uterus?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just don't think. Look, I don't think the Republican Party is where the country is on abortion,
that's a fact.
and I think that that's just is what it
Well,
is. And I think that most normal countries allow abortion in the first trimester and then restrict it heavily after the second and third
makes a lot of
trimester.
sense. Didn't we just see this
And
in what was Ohio just ratified abortion,
we
right?
saw it in Ohio. We've seen it
Right.
across every time it's on the ballot, the pro-lifers
Yeah,
lose.
that's a fact.
You know,
So you're saying it's more
so
about government control of our bodies, similar to
I
that
think it's just
COVID.
about rights.
Okay,
It's about like if I have a right and that right is taken from me, and I'm a woman, and I have grown up with the expectation of that right. I think as people fuck less, okay, they want the right to abortion more
interesting.
because that's sort of how I've come to think about it, which is that in our society we just don't have as much sex as we used to, and there's lots of reasons for
Hey,
that,
speak for
and there's a lot of
yourself,
very
buddy. Speak for
related.
yourself.
No, I mean we just don't.
I'm joking, man.
I
I'm,
mean,
I'm
trust me,
joking.
I'm doing my part. I'm doing
All
my
right, as long
part.
as you're
Believe
doing
me,
your part.
I'm doing my part. I'm doing my part, consensually or not, given all the various states I've been on. But consensually in the sense of like women. If you are a man that is willing to have sex with a woman, in America, this is not a hard thing. But in modern society, people are having a lot less sex, and it's just across the board that this is the case. And whether it's because there's something better on Netflix, or whether it's because they're addicted to porn, or whether it's because they're too fat, who knows the reason why people are having less sex.
Gotcha.
But people are having less sex across the board. And then those few who are having sex are having way more sex than they used to,
Okay.
right? So it's a very interesting sociological
Do
thing
you
going on.
So I don't think.
do you think
Go
that
ahead. Go ahead. Wes.
Hold on, Shepard. Let's let Book jump in here. Yeah, go ahead, Book.
I was gonna say, do you think that it's kind of it's one of these issues, it's like paradoxical, right? Where as this becomes more sort of, I don't know, legalized is the right word, but they put into the books what the rule is for the state, you'll actually have less abortion because as this became an animating issue, you actually had more abortion. It's one of these things that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but the evangelicals might win out because abortion is legalized, right? Does that make sense?
Well, book in
Yeah, I mean, I think
foster
I
care
think there's a
has
lot of
went up
paradox.
though. They just did a study in foster care for disadvantaged children, black children primarily were being put more into foster care in states that had restricted and banned abortion. This study just came out. I just
Yeah,
heard of it on
so
NPR.
my view just generally when it comes to the abortion issue is there's a question between what kind of politics are you going to have? Are you going to have uh, a pro-life or a pro-child politics, right? And if people are like, there are lots of women who make the decision to get abortions because they feel as if they can't afford having children, right? So that gets to like larger questions about economic resources and making it so that women, I mean, we don't have a lot of resources available to pregnant women or to people who are having children. Like we're one of the few countries that don't really give anyone time off
Safety
after
net.
they, yeah, like we don't have any of these things. So like having a child in the United States is scary relative to other European countries or to other kind of allied countries. And so I think that that's a big part of what drives abortion too. Is just like the costs, and then I don't think people have as much sex as they used to, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think our phones are more interesting than having sex with other people. I think this is like, this is the reality of the life that a lot of us are living, and I think partly it's because we live further and further away from each other. I think also it's a paradox of choice. It's kind of like when you go to the supermarket and you can't make a decision about what to buy, right? I think it's a very similar dynamic that goes on where you have kind of endless apps where there's always another option out there. Whereas in the past, you kind of married the woman from your village or whatever.
Okay, you're
And
depressing me. You're depressing me, man.
no, but I think this is true. I mean, I think like there's a reality to this, right? And I think this is a major reason, by the way, a lot of the whole passport bros culture exists because like a lot of people are kind of tired of like app culture, of like endless bar culture or whatever. And whereas in the past you used to meet with people at work, you can't really do that now because of Me Too. People are not going to church and anywhere the numbers that they used to. And so you're in this kind of situation where, we have food that makes it harder for people to get erections because our food quality is not that good and people get fatter. We have, we just have a lot of problems societally right now. And so you're
Well,
finding a lot of
WeWork just went bankrupt, so we people aren't going into the office either.
people aren't going to the office, so you're not meeting people. So like where are you going to meet
I mean,
somebody between your work desk and the fridge, right? Like how's that going to happen for you? And then, you go to a bar and pretty much everybody's on their phone at the bar. So who are you going to fuck at the bar if everybody's on their phone, right? Like, so
You
there's
see
like,
that in clubs too. It's like that in clubs. No,
yeah, you
everybody's
go to
looking
a
at their
club
phone.
now. You go to a club in the U.S. and everybody's like taking pictures to put on Instagram or TikTok, and you go to a club in Europe and everybody's bumping up against each other and grabbing each other, right?
Hey, let me ask you a question about the election, just to bring it home. Because this sex thing is interesting. But do you
No, but
think
I
that
by the way,
this
I
was a
can say that this
mandate?
is this is a major problem for the Republicans because the Republicans, if you have this view out there, right, that there's going to be all these new people, right? People are going to fuck like the Republicans seem to be obsessed with birth rates, right? That seems to be like a big thing. It's not clear to me the higher birth rate is necessarily a better society, right? Like living standards matter an awful lot more than your birth rate as a society. Like presumably you can like if everybody had like 20 children, right? you would basically like breed out of it. You basically consume all your resources, right? And like there is a
But it's about
carrying.
gerrymandering and representation. It's really not about that. It's about political control. That's the birth rate issue.
I think it's
Yeah, or cheap labor down in Arkansas because they like to move the ages down to
yeah. I
where
mean, the
kids
Republican
can work.
Party is the slave party now, unfortunately. And like if you just look at it, they need a lot of warm bodies to work in their chicken factories and in their fast food joints and working for Walmart and
Boy
whatever.
slot mills.
Yeah, and like these things are very bad for people. So, what you're seeing increasingly is people are fighting for their rights through labor unions, but there's lots of parts of the economy where they need workers. They need basically people working super cheaply, and so they'll import those workers from the third world if they have to, because they need to keep their profits up.
There's a town that's paying people to come move there. They're looking for all the migrants they can get. I forget. It was just a big news story. But hey, I'm gonna land. I'm gonna drop down. I just wanted to ask you one thing, and I'm done. Is this midterm off election, in you guys' opinion, any type of mandate about Joe Biden winning and Bidenomics and the
Yeah, like
country
Biden's going to
et
win the
al?
election. Like I keep saying this to people, and they keep getting mad at me for saying this. But like he doesn't have to be faster than the bear. He just has to be faster than the Republican opponent. And like everywhere we see, like yeah, Joe Biden loses to generic Republican, but like that's not going to be who's going to be on the ballot in November next year. It's going to be one of the jokers that's up on the stage, or maybe it's going to be Trump, who's not even bothering to show up on be on stage.
Christy DeSantis or the lady? What's the lady's name?
Yeah, I think
Governor.
personally, I
Yeah.
think I still believe it's going to be Chris Christie that ultimately wins the primary because I believe that primary elections are much more rigged than people want to admit.
Don't
And I
sleep on Christie. He's not a dull blade. He's sharp when he wants to
No,
be.
I've known Chris Christie a long time, and one of my very dear friends works for his campaign. And frankly, like I'm gonna endorse Joe Biden in December. I think, just personally, I think that's the right move. Um, but I like Chris Christie, and Chris Christie has done something I've always wanted to do, which is to send a Kushner to prison. So he has my undying respect just on those grounds alone. So and by the way, I like fat people. Fat people make me look good because I'm not working out. The fatter people are, the more I look like a viable option for all the women out there who I'd like to have sex with me, even though
Have
they're
you
upset.
seen Trump supporters laughing at Christie's weight? Come on,
Yeah.
bro. Damn.
I mean, and also when people were giving Biden shit for tripping, I was like, listen, I've been to a Trump rally. I know that there's a lot of people that if they were tripping at a Trump rally, they would not get back up. Right? So Biden seems to bounce right back up. And I don't know.
That's the DMX record. I'm tripping. I'm falling. I can't get up.
I mean, he is what he is. But anyway, so the point I was trying to make, the larger point I was trying to make about this is like I think Chris Christie has a viable future. Every time Trump endorsed candidates lose, I think Christie has increasingly a dominant future. And I think Christie is, whether people like Christie or not in this cycle, I think Northeastern Republicans that can get shit done, that are technocratic, that can like bring people together, I think all of that is to the good. And I think as interest rates rise, what you see historically is whenever you have a higher interest rate, people actually align themselves they become much more centrist, much more giving.
Northeast Republicans, like the ones who are trying to get rid of Santos, who just did that motion.
I don't know about the New York Republicans; they're hard to see, but like I could imagine a world in which Charlie Baker, or governor of Massachusetts, or some of these other Republicans from the Northeast, like a Chris Christie. I could see a scenario in which all of the suburbanite moderate types basically think the Democrats have gone too far. But I think everybody knows that Joe Biden is kind of a centrist guy. And I think everybody knows that Joe Biden is the candidate, going forward. And I think he's going to win. And I don't think there's really anything stopping him from winning, other than his own heartbeat. To be honest with you, you know. So that's just
I
kind
don't
of how
Yeah,
I look
yeah.
at
understand.
it.
Like people have like such a low. They have like such a low opinion of him when it's like he was a senator for how long? Then he was vice president. Then he won.
You know what it is
None of this stuff happens
I
by
think it's
accident. You know what I
because
mean?
people like to talk shit about their leaders generally. I think that that's a big part of being an American. And I think that he, like he doesn't fit the image of what you imagine a president could be. but like just look at his accomplishments. They're pretty incredible. Like all the legislative wins he's had. These wars are not really his fault in any meaningful sense. Like they're actually a kind of
No, not really.
consequence of Bidenomics, which I think. I mean, I think when you increase interest rates, as I say, it becomes much more about real resources. So I think the Israelis, and the whole fight over Gaza is really about just land cleansing.
It
Um,
is.
and then you look at Ukraine, and I think the same thing is sort of true there, which is that the Russians want to control that farmland.
It's the breadbasket.
Yeah,
Yeah, facts. Hey, let me ask you. So Biden. So Mitch McConnell is Kentucky, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so Bidenomics is literally spending 500 million in Kentucky right now through the infrastructure program in coal country,
Oh, it's more than
giving.
that. If you look at
Yeah, I
where
know it's more than that, but I know it's
if
more.
you
But I'm
look at
just
where he
saying
put
for
all
this
these factories,
project,
he fucked Mitch McConnell. Like Joe Biden executed. Like people have not gotten. They haven't figured this out yet. If you look at where all the factories are that Joe Biden has built, they're all around Kentucky. They're
yep.
and they're around the metro area there. Like there's a shitload of them in Columbus, right?
The
Like
mayor, some of the mayors in Kentucky have switched over to be Democrats now, just because Biden has come in Kentucky with so much money and has given their constituents union-paying jobs.
yep. And he has a vision for the future of the country, which is a strong middle class that's union dominated. And I honestly, when I was younger, I was kind of more union skeptical because my dealings with the unions had always been in public sector situations. And I'd seen a lot of like
They were like
criminal behavior.
CIA controlled though. Like unions were real sketchy. They were involved in coups in Chile. It was a lot. It was a lot of
There
union
was a
bullshit.
weird, unions were much weirder in the pre-Biden world. And I think Biden has basically made unions much more American friendly.
Normalized them,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that
I
they're
mean, unions got an uphill battle in the South where the laws are different, the legislatures are all red. I don't think they can expand really
I
quickly
don't think we
out in
will
the
ever
South.
really see unions dominate in the South just because I don't think that people in the South like them. But I think
Well, it's the
everywhere,
foreign corporations, the Toyotas. If we're talking about the UAW, we're talking about
I
foreign
just think if you look
corporations.
at the Midwest, so my view is that the future of politics in the US is the Midwest aligned with the Northeast against everybody else. And I think that's it's basically the Civil War coalition. And I think the Northeast plus the Midwest is a killer combination, particularly as the country warms and particularly as people move north to get away from the hurricanes and other issues. And so my view is that Virginia is extremely important. I mean, look, loading is right. The Midwest, the Rust Belt, the Mid-Atlantic states are becoming economic powerhouses. And
Pennsylvania used to be coal country. Yeah.
yeah, I think Pennsylvania has a lot of structural problems just based upon its infrastructure. But I would say, like, if you look at Minnesota, if you look at Indiana, if you look at Virginia, these states are very, very powerful. And they've got a whole bunch of let's make a deal Democrats in those states, right?
Break that
And
down for me. What is that? What's a let's make a deal Democrat?
let's make a deal Democrat is like, all right, here are the rules. Here's how we're gonna do things, but let's talk about how we can work together on this deal, right? So like when I started companies in California, I would basically get shaken down by the local government, right? And and when I started companies in Virginia or in Texas or whatever, the local authorities are like, yeah, what can we do to help you? Like start this business. How can we
Got you.
help you in all these ways?
Not Chicago politics, right? Got
Yeah,
you.
it's not a mob style shakedown. It's like a let's work together. Like when I started a business in the Woodlands, Texas, which is a very Republican area, but oddly at the time had a basically a Democrat mayor. He basically showed up and he was like, "Hey man, how can I help your business? What do you guys need?" He like came to the swearing in, the signing ceremony and the opening, the ribbon cutting. There's just like a lot more people that just want to see their communities thrive.
Economic development
Yeah.
reps come see you. The EOC. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, and I think Virginia. So I think that basically New York is a shakedown place. Illinois is a shakedown place. Basically in the Chicago area, it's a shakedown place. Outside of that, it's more complicated. But
Well,
so
Virginia is different. I'll tell you why Virginia is different. Let's take the cannabis, for instance. The top senator in Virginia just took a license for cannabis. The top senator in Virginia just took a piece of the casino action on the low. So they take their action off the cream off the top. They don't have to shake you down.
yeah, I think what they do in Virginia that's kind of different is remember Virginia was founded as a economic thing, right? It was a charter from the king to do tobacco, right? And there's this kind of history there of basically everyone paying up. It's like a kind of syndicate system, and it works quite well, in terms of the deals. You just have to. There's kind of reasonable light taxation. I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan. I'm a fan basically of Virginia. I think Florida is basically becoming the real estate kind of hustle, the kind of money laundering capital of the country. I think as Texas becomes purple, it becomes a lot more let's make a deal kind of place. And Texas, I think, is shifting away from mob style politics towards kind of like being like the role that Indiana or Illinois used to play, of being like the place where corporate America exists. So, like, if you look at a lot of the businesses that have moved to Dallas or to Houston, I think that that's kind of going to be useful. But I think ultimately Texas's problem is that it's too hurricane prone. It has too many kind of other kind of issues there.
You didn't even say the power grid and the way that they're extorting power customers,
Yeah, I don't
for
think that that's going to
profit.
survive for much longer, because I understand that the feds are much more involved there. But I think that that's going to change. But I think, all right, so we're good. We should wrap it up in a second. I know Tom and I have to get to bed. We have a big day tomorrow. Is there anything else that needs to be said? I mean, Adam, Paulie, either of you want to weigh in?
I was just going to say about the Northeast thing that it's kind of interesting because, like, I grew up in Philadelphia, and like all the union jobs and all this stuff that you're talking about, it's like it's interesting because I'm in Florida now, which is basically like 30 years old. I mean, maybe 100 years old at the oldest. But so the idea is like where I live now is like supposedly conservative, but it's a brand new place. When I go home to Philadelphia or I'm in DC or New York, I get that feeling of like, oh, I'm back. Like you know what I mean? Does that make any sense? So
I
it's a
know
weird
exactly what
thing.
you mean. I know
Yeah,
exactly
like
what you mean.
the
I've had the same
conservative
experience.
things.
Yeah, moving
Yeah, they're
from
all brand
Texas.
new. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And I think that there's something about, like, the home I was born in is 130 years old in Massachusetts, right? And it's a liberal area. It's a Democrat area. But then, the place I used to live in Texas was built like 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, I'm with you. I
Yeah, it's
understand what
crazy.
you're saying.
Totally different.
But I think that basically, as if you just look where, as Loading says, if you follow the water, you're going to find where the economic engine will be. And we have the Great Lakes. We have a lot of things going on in the country. So I'm very optimistic long term about the economic viability of the country. I think that people, though, there's going to be a remigration north. And I think that that's going to be the story of the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I'm in Cali and we're bleeding people, bleeding people.
I would notice, every time I go back to California, I go back to California about once a month or every 6 weeks or so, and it's just getting like much shittier every time I go there. Uh,
Dystopian.
yeah, it's much more drugged out. There's a lot more boarded up shops. Things just don't work as well as they did.
A lot of people
The
are
down
moving.
the downtown, the cities that surround Los Angeles, all of their downtowns are just dead.
Yes, it's weird. It's
That
creepy
is
even.
so sad.
I've spent
I
a
mean,
lot of time in the San Gabriel Valley over the years. It's one of my favorite places, but it's seen much better days for sure. And I don't think these areas are going to come back, because I think that the issue is long-term viability of these areas in terms of water and tax base and other issues. I just don't think that they have a real future. So
Hey, it almost rained yesterday.
I'm much more pessimistic. But go ahead, Book.
I was going to say a lot of people. I grew up in Eastern Washington, and a lot of people are moving there. They're moving up to North Idaho and in Western Montana too. They've had a lot of growth. But I don't
Yeah,
know if it's just people moving there or
the question, of course, is where is the water going to come from? And then what about the insurance markets? How do the insurance markets price a future of climate change with increased risks of fire And can people actually afford living in these areas?
We may have to buy it back from Saudi Arabia since they've been sipping all the water underground from all these cities in Arizona.
I think the Saudi scapegoating is useful up to a point, but I think the reality is that a lot of people have been consuming a lot more water in these areas than those areas can support. But
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely joking about the Saudis, but they are taking a lot of gallons of water out of Arizona for alfalfa for their damn goats and sheep.
yep, to be sure. All right. Well, I hope everybody. I think we'll probably leave it there tonight. I hope everybody has a very lovely, week. And if you haven't subscribed to the Substack, please do so. We'll be doing a lot more of these in the near future. Whatever money I make from the Substack, I just pour into the research. We did a piece about Mike Benz and about ops generally. We'll probably do something soon on stealth. Tom and I have a few other things we're going to maybe do. I think we'll be recording these spaces and maybe putting them up for people who want to consume them in different formats. I think maybe Tom, we should talk about that tomorrow, like how we're gonna set that up, because I think people like to listen to these things when they're driving or like doing the laundry or whatever, which is kind of a weird thing to think about my voice talking to people when they're doing the laundry or like the dishes. But I guess those dishes won't do themselves, so that laundry won't do itself.
Well,
So
they're not having sex. They might as well listen to you, bro.
that's right. That's right. And if
Yeah,
they're having sex and want to listen to me too, I'm okay with that.
no sex,
Ah, draw the
all
line.
outdoors.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm happy to be a part of that with you. Especially we need to increase the birth rate, right? Isn't that what we've been told? So I'm happy to be there with you. In
It
fact,
was all
I'm not
good
I was
until
quite
gonna
she.
say
I'm
they
not
are.
quite the let's get it on type.
It was
I'm
all
not
good
quite the
until
Barry
she
White.
called me Chuck.
Yeah, I'm not quite that, but I don't quite have that deep voice that can make that happen for you, ladies. But I'm willing to give it a shot. I know desperate times call for desperate measures. Um, I think just in general, just as a final kind of point, I think what we should be thinking about over the next week is what does this all mean for the Republican Party? What is its future? And I think right now the future looks quite bleak. Now, did Gibson win? By the way, has anyone checked if Gibson won? Did she win? Do we know? Looks like she's leading.
You sound like you could be giving a speech like an old FDR speech because
Oh
you're
yeah,
echoing
is my
again.
voice all? Well, we'll just call it a night then.
No, you should say down with Netanyahu,
Down with
Andrews.
Netanyahu, up with FDR. I mean with Biden. Let the American empire last for 1,000 years. All that good stuff. And hope everybody has a lovely week. And we'll do this again soon. By
Good
the way,
night.
there's a friend of mine in here who always says that I talk about gay Epstein. And we won't talk about gay Epstein tonight. But I'm definitely thinking about how Epstein was gay. So just so you know, that's an inside joke. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Like